All right. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Happy Friday. Friday night, y'all. June 26th, 2026. Hopefully, everybody had a great week. Good month for the most part. It's midsummer. Okay. It's summertime. And summer is showing its face. But welcome on in. Please share this. Let everybody know we're here tonight. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look under the microscope at Kegan Kline in terms of his transcript and what Sergio Dinaro had to think and his input into some of Kegan's words. Okay. And we know that there's an entire other aspect of this thing with Kegan Kline, which is the Reese Davis information, which we have explored quite in depth. And so that's available for you. If you're a new viewer here, if you're new to the Delphi murders and you're interested in what all this confusion is about and controversy, please go and check out our Reese Davis episodes. There are several, and there will be several more, in which he goes into the most viable suspects and truth that we know now. Okay. Anyway, this is meant to supplement Reese Davis's information. Okay. So we'll see how it goes. And I just want to say hi to everyone who's here tonight. First of all, I know it was rather short notice, so we'll be having people coming in who didn't realize we're going live. And if you're on the replay, do me a solid, right? And hit the like, subscribe if you choose, and most importantly, leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think, especially if you're new here. Introduce yourself. We have a great community. Everyone would be happy to hear from you. But I see tonight we have our main mod, Deb, here right on time. So please respect Deb if you're a new person to the chat. She's very nice and permissive, but don't cross her. We also have Alex came in, Silence Woman, Big JD, Victims News on Air, Erica, Woodcutter. We have Who's Her Daddy 11. Let me see what else we got in here. Mustang's here. What's up, Mustang? Trial Junkie. Hello, Trial Junkie. I am nobody. Who are you? All right. So, yeah, greet people as they come in. And this should be pretty interesting. You know, Sergio has some expertise in interrogation and understanding people's words and truthfulness and that sort of thing, indicators. And I think it's going to be very interesting, okay? Now, before we get started, let me just tell you a little about Sergio. According to his own bio, Sergio is a seasoned deception detection expert with over 20 years of extensive experience in federal safety, security, and intelligence operations. Now, Sergio's career has spanned key roles in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, where he served as a federal air marshal and a human intelligence collector with the Department of Defense. Again, human intelligence collector with the Department of Defense. And I think those of you who would do your due diligence, you would know what that means. Sergio's academic credentials include a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Michigan. He's also extensively trained in various specialized courses through the DoD, holding certifications in LSI, Scientific Content Analysis, Basic and Advanced. Reed, Basic and Advanced Interrogation courses. He's an expert in the Reed technique, in other words. He's an expert in Army interrogations, DoD certified. Also an expert in counterintelligence, being a certified counterintelligence special agent. He's also attained a DoD certification in the strategic debriefing course. So for all intents and purposes, it would be accurate to classify Sergio as a Fed, okay? So with that being said, as we go into his observations on some of the words of Kegan Kline tonight, keep in mind that he's coming from a career in the federal government with the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security, with counterintelligence, with expertise in the Reed technique and all of these things. And we've covered Sergio a little before, and we will be doing this again. So let me say this. This will be one in a series of episodes wherein we explore some of Sergio's observations on the key players in the Delphi murders, okay? Meaning we're going to take a look at Doug Carter through the lens of Sergio's expertise. We're going to take a look at Richard Allen through the lens of Sergio's expertise. And we may review Kelsey German's statements through the lens of Sergio's expertise, although we have done that already, and you can find that on the channel. If you look back a bit, we covered Sergio's observations on Kelsey already. But tonight, the sole focus is Kegan Kline, because we know, as I mentioned, due to our extensive discussions with Reese Davis, who was temporarily housed with Kegan Kline, we know a lot about Kegan Kline's statements. We also know, due to a great friend of the channels, and that's Noe Amos, David Noe Ramos. Okay, Noe brought us a wealth of information from Kegan Kline and from other individuals who had been housed with Kegan Kline. And the interesting thing here, although many will say Kegan is a liar, and he certainly is, all the various angles at which we have gleaned information from Kegan Kline all corroborate each other in different ways. So therefore, we are convinced that Kegan Kline had some part in these murders of Abby and Libby in Delphi, Indiana. We are also convinced that Kegan Kline has a deep knowledge of who else was involved in the murders of Abby and Libby in Delphi, Indiana in 2017. And we also absolutely know that Kegan Kline was responsible for Abby and Libby showing up in Delphi, Indiana to be targeted in the afternoon of February 13th, 2017, whether it was directly or through allowing the use of his account, Anthony_Shots, by someone else known to him. And whatever the case may be, we are absolutely convinced that not only does Kegan have knowledge of who the other parties were who were involved in this murder, we understand that Reese Davis explained to us that Ron Logan had detailed knowledge of this. And we believe the family knows this. We believe law enforcement knows this. And it's truly only a matter of time until the chickens come on home to roost and the truth is known about the Delphi murders, because no matter what anyone says, Richard Allen is not the lone wolf killer of Abby and Libby in the Delphi murders. It was a group of people who murdered those poor girls. They've gotten away with it. including Kegan Kline. And law enforcement has allowed them to continue to get away with it. Let me remind you of some of the words of Jerry Holman. You're not the mastermind of this. Remember what he told Richard Allen? You're not the mastermind. Which would indicate there are others involved. And even Nicholas McClellan, in his earliest filings, indicated that there was reason to believe that others were involved. So whether you believe Richard Allen was involved or not, or had any involvement or not, you have to be mature enough to acknowledge that whether or not Richard Allen was involved in any way whatsoever, it is a certainty that others were. And why is it okay that those others get away with the brutal murder, the slaughter, the vicious brutality that we witnessed at that crime scene in the murders of Abby and Libby? And I'd like you to keep in mind another thing. Everybody lied. Everything is fake, okay? All the evidence is fake. All the digital evidence, right? All the witness testimony, and the entire investigation at this point. It's all a house of cards, and that house of cards will come tumbling down. It's only a matter of time. So, with that being said, let's do a little exploring. Let's do a little exploring of Sergio's observations. Before we get started, I want to welcome a few others into the chat. My favorites here. We got Monday is here. Welcome, Monday. I see that Nancy Drew 101 is here. Welcome, Nancy Drew. God bless you. It's a new day. My favorite is here. God bless. It's a new day. And of course, I'll just shout out Trial Junkie again because she's here. But yeah, guys. So everything's fake. Everything's a lie. Hey, Rebecca Ann's here. Her baby daddy's here. Good to see you, familiar faces. I love you guys. But everything's fake, okay? If you believe that Bridge Guy video is legitimate, you got another thing coming. You'll find out. If you believe all those Snapchat images are legitimate, you'll find out. If you believe the family and witnesses all told the absolute truth and all their stories make sense as the state claims in the way that the state claims, you'll find out. It's all been lies. It's been nothing but lies. And you got to ask yourself, who are they protecting? Who is being protected in the unfolding of a massive cover-up around the murders of two little girls nearly 10 years ago? Can anyone explain that? There have to be important people involved in this scheme somehow to warrant being protected to this level. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And I would remind you all of the absolute general, what's the word? Ubiquitousness of the witchy poo vibes in that area, meaning all of the individuals that have this cult-like take on reality. And not only do you have this real cultish atmosphere in Carroll County, but you also have a predilection for pedophilia, which leads us to this concept of the Dropbox, which leads us to this notion of trying to understand the reality that Jalen Rain was describing since the very in the very aftermath of these murders. Jalen Rain attempted to convey to the world that there was something wrong here, that there's sex trafficking, there's child exploitation, there's pedophilia, there's raping, there's kidnapping, there's sex clubs doing this, and no one listened to her. So in my opinion, where the nexus lies is the intersection of all these things. And that's something for you to chew on. That might warrant a cover-up of this nature, because important people would be the ones who could afford young girls. And if these important people in these important clubs were performing ritualistic sex activities, trafficking women, children, young ladies, young girls, as Jalen Rain said, some of them were young, it would make sense. And for some reason, you have a large number of powerful players who all seem to be okay with looking the other way and protecting all of this. And for me, this is the reason that you would see a cover-up of this nature, because important interests are being protected. And that's the only explanation that makes sense. That is Occam's razor when applied to the Delphi murders in totality. This is what you get when you take a look at the totality of circumstances, as the prosecution of Richard Allen likes to say. So with that being said, we'll get into it, but I'd just like to welcome those who have just came in or just come in, and that's Court of Public Opinion, Partner in Crime. We got a K Special, Spectrum Leadership, Carla Ann, T-Bone, and hey, anyone else I've missed, apologize. Just let us know you're here. Brenda Mays, let's see. All right, so let's get rolling. Okay, let's get rolling. Hey, thanks for being a member, Rebecca Ann. Member for 15 months. Thank you very much. I love you guys so much. I love the memberships. I love when you participate in the channel. And like I said, if you happen to catch the replay, do me a favor. Do us all a favor. Leave your comments down below, because you missed the live stream. At least we could have your input on the replays. So with that being said, let's kind of dive on into Sergio's observations here, and I'll stop when I feel necessary. But yeah, Dropbox is the nexus.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth Revealed. I'm Sergio Dinaro. If you woke up this morning and thought, you know what, I want to find something positive and uplifting to watch because I really want to soar into this weekend on a positive note, well, I'm happy to inform you that you came to the wrong place today. So buckle up. In fact, take a minute, go get your coffee, your weighted blanket, and your emotional support stuffy, and curl up in a little ball and prepare for story time with Sergio here. Because over the past week, I've had to dive headfirst into this trauma bath, and so now I'm going to take you with me.
Does this now mean that all the other men are cleared? Can you use that word?
Who is all the other men?
The other men that were looked at during the course of the investigation that you always said we couldn't say that they're cleared. Can you now say they're cleared?
I may not use that word cleared, but what I can tell you is we don't have any other evidence that ties them to the offense at this time.
Today, we are going to delve into the depths of a very dark mind in order to answer all of the questions that we obtained by watching that first interrogation of Richard Allen. I'm going to break this video down into 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to teach you an element of deception detection that's the foundational piece. I've talked about it in a couple of videos now, but I'm going to talk about it in this video too, because it by itself is enough to understand probably 50% of deception detection. Once you really master this foundational piece, you'll be able to pretty well recognize deception in your everyday life, even without knowing all of the little rules that I have. The second thing that I want to cover is the steps that I go through when I conduct my own investigation. As you've had a chance to see already, I kind of go into it backwards. So I don't pay attention to any of the evidence. I start with the interrogation of the subject to learn, first off, is that person innocent or guilty? What can I learn from that person? And then what are the next steps that we need to look at? The last thing we're going to do, after we follow those steps, it's going to lead us to one very dark person. And we are going to dissect that person's brain. We're going to go through that statement, and we are going to learn everything there is to know about this case. In case you didn't know, that person is Kegan Kline. I'm sure if you've been following the case, you know who that is. By the end of this video, you will either feel vindicated in what you believed, you'll feel a sense of relief, and then you'll feel like, okay, it's time to move on to the next stage here. Or you'll be curled up in a little ball sucking your thumb, and that's okay too, because that's how I've been for the last 3 days. I just have a hard time wrapping my mind around the decisions that real people make and why they make them. It is mind-boggling. I just don't understand. I understand people, but I don't understand people. So let's jump into this. The first thing.
Yeah, most people you can't understand. Most people you can't understand. But no, it's a good start to this because, as he mentioned, he's going to first show the basic elements of deception detection, which is important. Okay, so let's listen what he has to say.
Thing I want to cover is that foundational piece, which is how your mind and why your mind translates thought into words. We've talked about this before. There's a Broca section in your brain. What does that do? Your brain thinks in electrical impulses and chemical signals that get sent between neurotransmitters. That is fundamentally a computer. Essentially, your brain is a binary system. Each neurotransmitter either fires or it doesn't fire. And it sends a signal to the next neurotransmitter that tells it to either fire or don't fire. That is a binary system, ones and zeros. It's all open or closed. So it functions in the same way that your computer functions. The reason why it's so important to understand that is because we think very quickly. We have to. Whether you believe in evolution or creation, it doesn't matter. Because either we evolved a certain way in order to survive, or God created us a certain way so that we could survive. We have an ability to take in our environment and process it and figure out what's important and what's not important almost instantly. Then we also have the ability to communicate what we're taking in to the people around us. That is, of course, one of our survival techniques. We have to be able to speak almost simultaneously with our thoughts, because we don't think in language, we think in ones and zeros. Like you have a little librarian that is looking at the matrix, right, on the screen, and then it's like you have a matrix to English dictionary, and that little librarian has to assign a word to every thought. As they're looking at the matrix, they have to assign words to that. Now, can you imagine if this was an actual person that was just sitting there looking up every single word? If you were trying to communicate something like there's a tiger in the bushes, they would see tiger in the matrix because that's what their eyes are bringing in, an electrical signal. So they'd have to flip through their dictionary. Oh my God, what is that called? What is that called? That's a tiger. Okay, tiger. And then they have to flip through their dictionary again. In the, we would all be dead. There's no way that we could survive that way. So we have a section of our brain that is hardwired. It's a direct, like an API into our thoughts, and it's an automatic language translator. So without having to purposefully and mindfully select words, this part of our brain just automatically assigns words to our thoughts. That allows us to stay alive. but it can only assign the correct word to the thought. That makes sense. If it was assigning random words, you'd just be word salad. It would be a jumble of random words that would come out.
In other words, Michael Osbrook.
It makes sense that you have to have the correct word assigned to what you're actually thinking. And then if you want to lie, you have to manipulate that. So that message can get sent to your prefrontal cortex that can decide this word is detrimental to us right now. We need to change this. I want to go one layer deeper in this video. I want to talk about first, do people have the ability to multitask or multi-process? Can their brains actually do two things simultaneously? The answer to that is no. The human brain can't. What we are good at is doing a short part of one task, switching over to another task, and doing a short part of that task and jumping back. So we can jump between the two tasks very quickly in order to almost do two things at the same time. So when we talk about does somebody have the ability to multitask? What we're really talking about is, do they have the ability to very quickly go back and forth without losing track of what they were doing in each project? That's an important differentiation, because the fact that your mind can't actually do two things at the same time means that you can't simultaneously hold and act on two thoughts. You can only hold and act on one thought.
Okay, so what he's doing here, I really love it. And I love that he's mansplaining this, because what he's doing here is laying the groundwork for the tells of deception, right? He's laying the groundwork or the fundamental understanding for why tells exist and why these things show themselves, because there's a fundamental disconnect or cognitive dissonance, you know. It's because there's an impossibility and it takes extra work to lie, right? So
imagine that your brain is a CPU and you can allocate a certain amount of resources to a task. In order to complete most tasks, your brain is going to have to commit 100% of the resources to the task at hand, and then it can switch to the other task. Now, let's say, for example, that while I'm making this video, I want to sell some of my merchandise. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking at some point I need to show a coffee cup here, but that thought doesn't interfere with my teaching. It's something that I can put on the back burner and I can teach. Then at some point when it naturally comes up, I can take a little bit of a pause and take a drink of my coffee, and my mind, it just transferred over. Let me finish this task, and then it transfers back and I pick up to where I left off. Now, if I was to go back and look at the transcript on that, I wouldn't see any indicators through that first part of the lesson that this person is thinking about merchandise or advertising. I wouldn't get that at all until it actually pops into the video. The reason is because that doesn't weigh heavily on the subject. It doesn't occupy any of the CPU power. I want you to think of something that you actually did, either a time when you broke the law or you did something that you weren't supposed to do. If that thing that you're thinking about right now, if that was criminal and it was major, that is something that occupied a significant amount of your processing power continuously. It's something that you can't get out of your mind. If that's, let's say you cheated on a significant other, then that's something that you can put aside if you're not standing in front of your significant other in that moment. But
yeah, and so what he's getting at now is the fundamental weight of components of thought, because depending on the stress that whatever component is giving you, it's weighted differently. As he mentioned, his coffee cup, well, maybe it has 1% stress because he's thinking, oh, at some point during this hour, I have to take a sip of the coffee cup and show the merch. Okay, maybe 1% stress, right? But if he's hiding the fact that he killed 2 little girls, well, yeah, maybe it's 80% stress. Yeah, it's weighted quite differently.
As soon as you're standing in front of them, that thing that you did is going to begin to occupy a tremendous amount of your mental energy. The fact that you are simultaneously holding that memory active, it's no longer in the background. It's not like selling merchandise where that can just disappear and you don't even think about it until a situation comes up where you want to do that. This is going to play all the time. It detracts from your total mental capacity that you have available because you're actively thinking about that. Now, it's not something you have to do. It's not like multitasking where you have to think about one thing 100% and something else 100%. It's a sandbag that just weighs on your brain. So it's in there every time you look at your significant other, you're thinking about what you did the night before. And that is going to come out in your language. Why? Because that broke a section of your brain. It's looking at the matrix, remember? It's just scanning your reality. And when it is scanning something that is in your memory, that is going to come out in your language. It impacts the words that get selected. Because remember, you don't select those words purposefully. That is a process that's done completely automatically based on the memories that are activated in your brain in that moment. The more something weighs on you, the more of your processing power that it's taking up in the background, the more that that is going to come out in your verbiage. And that is what I look for. I am looking for an indicator that a memory is weighing on that individual in that moment. There are certain verbal indicators that are pretty consistent and verbal indicators that are unique based on the situation, not the individual, but on the crime. I hope that part makes sense. The next thing that I want to talk about is a principle of interrogation. What I was talking about before is deception detection. There's a principle of interrogation that builds on this principle, is that everybody wants to talk about everything all the time. I'm not sure if I believe that or not. Well, yeah. Have you ever heard a good piece of gossip and thought, yeah, I don't care if I don't feel the need to tell anybody about that? Or something good happens to you. You get a promotion at work and you come home and it doesn't occur to you to tell your wife or your significant other. It's just built into us to communicate big things, important things, things that happen. To not talk actually requires an element of control. It requires a purposeful decision to not say something. To build on that, as an interrogator, if you keep that in mind, that everybody wants to say everything all the time. The reason why they don't is because there's a barrier to saying that.
That's why we call it a wall or a shell. You know, walls are for protection or containing things or keeping things out, right?
Either they're going to get in trouble or there's going to be some sort of negative consequences if they say something. What we're going to do as an interrogator is we're going to reduce, minimize, mitigate. We're going to get rid of that thing that makes them not want to talk about it. If you decide to steal $100,000 from work, you might have that $100,000 on you. You come home and you want to be able to tell your family, we've got money. There are desires to get that information out, but then there's a barrier to talking about it because you don't want people to know that you committed a crime because of the consequences. That barrier, think of it like a dam. And sometimes the dam can start to crack. And when it cracks, you get leaks. And that's why I say it's sometimes you get leakage in somebody's statement. There are things that people don't want you to know that leak out. They're actively trying to hold it back. But then for some reason, they decide in this moment, I'm going to say this, or I'm going to use this word. Sometimes it's subconscious, sometimes it's consciously. They decide that the barrier that's causing them to not talk about it, that scale has balanced out where they feel like the benefit of talking about it outweighs the risk of talking about it. Naturally, these scales are out of balance. People have a desire to talk about things. All things being equal, that person is going to talk about it. the barrier that causes them to not talk about that has to actually be pretty weighty in order to overcome the desire to talk about it.
And that's why Ron Logan confessed to Reese Davis. Think about it. He's old, lonely, scared. He's locked up. Reese looks like a criminal. He's receiving the information. He's being nice to you. You see? Because that dam's going to burst if you don't let out a little pressure, right? There's a release valve.
But one of the greatest examples of leakage that I like to give, because most people can relate to, try and imagine a time, maybe back in high school or sometime early in your life, when you were in a relationship with somebody and you met someone, maybe someone that was in a new class, a lab partner, something like that. This obviously works with a new coworker, and that person is exciting. That person is attractive. They have a similar personality. You like to talk to them. Then you go home from work or go home from school, and you're literally standing in front of your significant other, and you feel a compulsion to talk about this new lab partner, new coworker, this new whatever, this new person that you met. And you know in your mind, what am I doing? Why am I talking about this? This is not something that I should be even mentioning this person's existence, but they do. People do mention that. And that is something that once you understand this desire that people have to talk, you can pay attention to what they say. The indicator that you look for is called out of sequence information. If you're telling me about your day at work and whatever, you're working on this project, oh, and there's a new coworker today that I'm training, and that person's really cool, and we went out to lunch. All of a sudden, that person's really cool, we went out to lunch. That's extra information. That's not information that you would normally give me in this story. I'm just going to file that in the back of my head. That was weird. That was out of sequence information. Let's see if this information shows up tomorrow. The next day, all of a sudden, this person gets mentioned again. So-and-so did this, so-and-so did that. That's, again, out of sequence information based on whatever the topic at hand is. Once you notice that out of sequence information about that person, you understand that that's leakage. That's something that is taking up brain space, computer power, and it gets put into words, gets vocalized. When we look at people's statements, they might be getting interrogated, they might be being interviewed, or they might just be talking to the press, but they're speaking. I look for leakage. I look for indicators, and I find them because I know that people are going to talk about what they're thinking about. So this principle is going to lead us into part 2 of what we're going to do today. I'm going to walk you through my investigative process here. I spent all last week working on Richard Allen's interrogation video, put it out over the weekend. Monday, I got up and thought, okay, where do I go from here? What's the next step? What stood out to me in Richard Allen's interrogation was leakage from the detective. Richard Allen himself had nothing to do with this. There's no time over the course of that entire interrogation where the memory of murder was playing on his words.
Hello. Hello. This is becoming very important now.
It never incorporated itself into his vocabulary. We did
Yes, he used the word never.
notice the leakage from the detective. I decided the first step I want to do is I want to go and I want to look up any press conferences that the police put out.
Did he say Holman leaked? Did he say Holman has leakage?
Turns out there was one right after Richard Allen was convicted. I don't know if he was the DA or the ADA, but he went and gave a press conference. During that press conference, at the very end, there was one quick question asking about if looking at Anthony's shot as a suspect, if that was over, if there was anything more with that. The prosecutor immediately shut that down. He got very uncomfortable very quickly. The way I remember it, because of his body language, was we don't need to talk about that. We don't need to think about that. Don't ever mention that again, is what he was thinking when he said what he said. In fact, let's play it right here.
But I guess given all the questions and you've all addressed.
This is McClellan shitting his pants, literally. McClellan is currently shitting his pants.
Sit up here and how frustrating it was. Your confidence in the security of this verdict and in this maximum sentence?
I feel confident in the verdict and the sentence. But again, I'm not on the Court of Appeals, so they'll have to make that decision.
The Anthony Shots profile and any other secondary investigation.
What do you mean looking into the Anthony Shots profile?
Well, it does is when you
Did you hear that fucking fighting words there? What do you mean looking into the Anthony Shots profile? Exactly what he fucking said, douchebag. Sorry, I get mad. Okay, let's back it up and I'll shut up and we'll read Sergio's annotations. Hold on. Yeah, they don't want to talk about Anthony Shots at all whatsoever, or the Dropbox. And that goes for the cranks too, by the way. Have you noticed the cranks? They don't want to talk about the Dropbox. They don't want to talk about Kegan Kline. They don't want to talk about Anthony Shots.
Have to make that decision.
The Anthony Shots profile and any other secondary investigation.
What do you mean looking into the Anthony Shots profile?
Well, it does is when you get that for information or the user of that profile. At least the Klein was in custody at that time, and then it just kind of faded out.
Well, it didn't fade it out. He was convicted of what, 34, 35 counts?
If anybody else connected from that profile to this fix level.
Not that we have any information of that right now.
Can you speak to the tires?
Maximum sentence on each count. And so I thank you. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Abby and Libby themselves. Libby for recording the defendant as he walked across the bridge, having the wherewithal to pull out her phone and record that individual, having the wherewithal to know that something wasn't right.
Fake news.
Arguably the biggest piece of evidence that we had, that recording of their killer. And then to Abby for hiding the phone from the killer so that he couldn't take it with him.
Fake news. What kind of bullshit story is that? Who would ever believe that that girl hid the phone under her body as she was dying to keep the killer from taking it? Get the fuck out of here. That is the most, whoever believes that shit, you seriously need mental help. If you still believe the fantasy world stories of this prosecution, you seriously need help. Oh, drew an F on a tree, but it's just the victim steadying herself in her last moments as she's bleeding out, dying. Oh, hid the phone. There's a phone planted under the body with a fucking fake bunch of digital evidence on it. Oh, but no, that's the dying victim in her last heroic moments, shoving the phone under a shoe under her own dying body because she wanted to keep Richard Allen from taking it.
Hiding the phone so that law enforcement could find it and get that piece of evidence that Libby had collected.
Yeah, absolute insult to anyone's intelligence who hears that. Total fucking insult to your intelligence.
Without the efforts from those two little girls, we wouldn't be here today. So Abby and Libby, thank you.
So immediately I jumped on Google and YouTube and said, who's Anthony Shot? I found out that that is a fake account that was made by Kegan Kline. So I looked into that. I watched a couple of YouTube videos. I watched a podcast from Murder Sheet. I found out that Kegan Kline had been interviewed about the child pornography case that he was eventually convicted of. He was one of the largest child pornography distributors, collectors in Indiana state history.
Until Libby's cousin came along. No, Libby's uncle. Libby's uncle, Adam Bridge. Adam Bridge is the new biggest producer and possessor of CSAM in Indiana history. So yeah, sorry, Kegan, you've been outdone by Libby's uncle.
And that evidence was uncovered during the investigation of the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. So I thought, what's the connection there? And then I went and I looked for his interrogations. And while I couldn't find a YouTube video of his interrogation, I found the transcript. I brought up the transcript where they were interviewing him about the child pornography, 200-page transcript, and turns out the last 80 pages of the transcript are all about the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. So I meticulously went through that. When he was already in jail, he was being interviewed about the child pornography charges that were being brought against him, but there was 2 detectives in there and they were asking questions specifically about the murder. Oh boy. We now have a whole interrogation/interview that we can go through here, and we can look for deception, and we can look to see if we can gain any more information about these murders, about the crimes, and that's what we're going to do right now. So that's the third part of this video. We are now going to go through Kegan Kline's interview regarding the child pornography charges that were brought against him. As we go through this, I want you to keep in mind the lesson that we talked about earlier about the way that when you have a memory that is a heavy memory, like murdering 2 little girls by stabbing them in the throat, a memory like that, it's not something that you can put on a back burner, because when a detective is specifically asking you questions about the murder, it's not possible for you to not relive that murder while they're talking about it. You have those memories, they're gonna
Boom, boom, boom. You participate in the murder of these girls. It's impossible for you to not think and talk about it.
flash, and they're going to play in your head while you're answering these questions. That is going to spill out in the verbiage. Before we go into this, I want to tell you one of the rules that I look for. It's literally called a confession, which means I'm looking for, does the subject ever say at any point in their statement, I did this, or I killed her? It's always said in the negative. I can't believe you're saying that I killed Libby German. It seems like it's said in the negative. The same way that when you come home from work and you're talking to someone at work and you're starting to have feelings for that person, you never say, I'm attracted to this new person, so we went out to lunch and hung out. You don't phrase it like that. The way that you phrase it is, I'm training this new coworker, whatever, we went out to lunch to talk about this new project.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, sounds like Sergio has some experience in this realm. Who doesn't? Whoops.
You're saying the actions that you did, and you're phrasing it in a way that makes it so that the person hearing it is going to mentally skip over what you're saying. But that principle is something that you will find often in a lengthy interrogation of a guilty subject. That's one of the indicators that I was looking for as I was going through this statement. So let's see if he accidentally slips in, I killed them, I killed these girls, into his statement anywhere in here. So let's get started. On about page, I think it was 63, there's a portion of this conversation that is important because of some of the information that comes out. So where it says A, I'm not sure what A stands for, but in here it stands for Kegan. So the Q, I'm not sure what Q stands for. It just looks like question and answer. DC stands for Detective Clinton, Carter, I'm not sure. But just so you know, every time it says A, that is Kegan. So first question, you also are used, that's your primary phone, and you don't, all the child porn's on it. Kegan, come on. And Kegan says, I swear to God, no child, I guess child porn technically is anything under 18, but yeah, no kids like that, ever. You can show me anything you want. That doesn't mean that was me doing it. There's 3 big problems with this question. First, he says, I swear to God. That's an indicator of sensitivity. That alone is not an indicator of deception. But if it's surrounded by other indicators of sensitivity or indicators of deception, that makes that an indicator of deception. Now, the reason why it's usually an indicator of deception is because a truthful, honest person, the truth is backing them up. And the truth is the ultimate rock solid foundation. So when you know you're telling the truth, you say it with authority, and you don't need any other authority. When somebody says, I swear to God, I swear on my mother's grave, I swear on the Bible, it means that they feel that they don't have enough authority. They don't have anything backing them up. So anytime somebody's trying to give themselves more authority, it means they're not relying on the truth. He says, I swear to God, no child, and then he cuts himself off. I guess child porn technically is anything under 18. He just told you there that he has child pornography on his phone. Now he's going to insinuate that there's an age cutoff here. So he says, yeah. Yeah is leakage. When somebody says yeah, it means they're agreeing with the accusation because the memory in their head matches the accusation. The automatic word that gets pulled is going to be in agreement with the accusation. So he says, yeah. A truthful person is going to start by saying no. No kids like that, because he's actually trying to say a negative statement. So instead of saying, but no kids like that, he says, but yeah, no.
I like this one. This is a good observation he just made. Let me back it up in 15 seconds. You guys listen to that again. That's a really poignant observation he made there. Real perceptive, I mean.
The accusation. The automatic word that gets pulled is going to be in agreement with the accusation. So he says, yeah. A truthful person is going to start by saying no kids like that, because he's actually trying to say a negative statement. So instead of saying, but no kids like that, he says, but yeah, no kids like that ever. Okay, now we have a few problems with this too. Other than the yeah, he says like, which means not that. So if something is like something else, it means it's not that other thing. We call that a reduction of commitment, and we have to take that into consideration here. And then he also uses the word ever. So the problem with the word ever and never is that they apply to all of time, into the future, the past. If you say something like, I would never do that, that means I'm telling you that in the future that can't happen. And obviously we don't know the future. So if I'm telling you something that I know, that you know, that it's not true to a certain extent, it means that it's not true to any extent. That's the largest reduction of commitment word that we can find. No kids like that ever. That also means into the future, because he's not talking about a specific time period. There's no reason why he wouldn't continue to look at child pornography in the future. This isn't a closed time event. It's not an action that started and ended. So we know that's deceptive. So now we actually have 4 indicators up to this point, which means we know with certainty that this is a strong indicator of deception here. Then he says, you can show me anything you want about the child pornography that's on his phone. That doesn't mean that was me doing it. Now notice the way that this is phrased makes this an insinuation. Insinuation is one of the biggest things that we look for. It refers back to that rule that we talked about before we got into this, which is what's on your mind. If you have the memory of a crime on your mind right now, it is virtually impossible to directly contradict that. A deceptive person will never be able to say, I didn't do it. I didn't do that. I didn't kill her. Anything that misrepresents reality 100%, you're just never going to see that. So you see things like this. This is an attempt at a denial by insinuation. You can show me anything you want. That doesn't mean that was me doing it.
Yeah, isn't that obvious? Isn't that obvious? Why would he even say that? You can show me anything you want, but that doesn't mean it was me doing it. On your phone? On your phone?
He doesn't say he didn't do it. When somebody is responding to an accusation and they respond with an insinuation, it means the truth is the opposite of their insinuation. Sometimes when somebody's being deceptive, you don't know what the truth is. They say, I think my car was red. You know that they're being deceptive, so the car's not red, but that doesn't tell you what color the car actually is. So it's nice when we get binary deception, because then we know what the truth is. Okay, so we know that he has child pornography on his phone. We know that the age of the children doesn't matter to him. And we know that...
No, because they go all the way down to 3 years old, don't they?
It was him doing it. So we can move on now to the next question here. And the detective says, it's on your device. And he says, okay, that happened. I mean, That's probably happened to a lot of people. That doesn't mean that. And then he gets cut off and he says, no, it doesn't happen, meaning to a lot of people. Now, when he says that happened, that is a confession. It's one of those statements like, I did it. He says, that happened. That is just straight up. Those are the words of a confession that have been worked into his statement here. He says, okay, that happened. I mean, now this is where it gets crazy. Okay, I mean is also a reduction of commitment. That's probably another reduction of commitment. Happened to a lot of people. He's saying here that a lot of people have child pornography on their phones. It doesn't mean that, we don't know what he's going to say here, but I'm guessing he says it doesn't mean that I put the child pornography on there, something like that. So the detective cuts him off. This is where sometimes your personal emotions as the interrogator get the best of you. You want to try to control that because you want to let the subject talk. The more they say, the more information you get that inevitably you're going to be able to use against them or use in the analysis. But he cuts him off. He says, no, it doesn't happen to everyone. So not everyone walks around with child pornography on their phones. During the course of the investigation, they pulled all of the records from all of his electronic devices. And at this point, they've printed it off.
Yeah, except the fucking ones he destroyed, deleted, wiped, and hid at home.
And they're showing it to him. So we know that this is true. It did happen. So we know that when he says, okay, that happened, that is a confession. But we also have verification that it's a confession through the evidence that's presented there. Okay, next question here. When he says, no, it doesn't happen, technically that's not another question. That's an interruption to the answer to the previous question. So anything that Kegan says at this point is extra information. It's not part of the question unless he's continuing to talk about it being on his device. And he says, okay, someone shoots someone and then they're with the person. That happens a lot. And then they get charged for it and they say that they killed them. That doesn't mean that they killed them. Okay, hold on. What? Back up.
Whoa. So you see on this, listen, on this statement here, it sounded like stupidity when I first read it. But like Sergio bringing our attention to this at this point, it takes on a new meaning. You know, looking at it anew, it this is kind of heavy, this particular statement.
Because the question was about child pornography on your device. So he is giving you open information here. It wasn't prompted. It wasn't asked for. This is just telling you that this is information that is weighing heavily on Kegan's mind right now. So what is he insinuating? First, we want to figure out what is his actual insinuation here, remember? Because when you insinuate something, it means the truth is the opposite. So we do have to understand what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that the child pornography, even though it's on his phone, it doesn't mean that he's the one that took the pictures, because he's saying that, okay, someone shoots someone, he's with someone else, that other person shoots someone, and they're the person. And then he says that happens a lot. And then they get charged for it, they being himself, the person who's been charged with the child pornography. So they is in reference to himself here. They're with the person, that happens a lot, and then they get charged for it. And they say that they killed them. That means Kegan says that Kegan killed them. That doesn't mean that they killed them. So he's saying that doesn't mean that I killed them. Okay, now that we have the insinuation, which...
Don't you find it odd that he references murder as his example of why he's innocent of child pornography?
Which is that the child pornography on his phone isn't his. Someone else in this example could have taken those pictures, and he was just the accomplice that was there and wasn't the person who was actually exploiting the children. He was just the accomplice. Even the analogy is a confession in its own right. He's not even denying this at all. He's saying that his defense here is that he wasn't the person who was the mastermind behind this. And the word mastermind is on my mind right now because that was leakage from the interrogation. That means to me that the detective is aware of this interview, and I will get to that more in a minute here. But what does this verbiage tell us? He's using the example of murder. So murder's weighing on his mind. Okay, someone shoots someone and then they're with the person, that happens a lot. He's saying when there's a murder and there's a murderer and you're the accomplice, the Broca section of his brain is scanning and analyzing his memories as he's formulating words. As he's trying to come up with this example, it's scanning the murder because that's what's on his mind. And so he uses murder as his example here. I know that. By now you know that. But it's still what? I'd say 90%, because murder, sometimes people just throw murder out as the example. It's just the easiest thing because it's the worst thing. But he says that happens a lot. That is a personal reference that he has inserted into this general example. This analogy now has a personal note to it. That happens a lot. He's telling you this happens to me a lot. So I'm assuming that it happens to everybody a lot. And then they get charged for it and they say that they killed them. That doesn't mean that they killed them. He is telling you numerous things here. He's trying to tell you literally that there's a mastermind and that he is only the accomplice. That's what he's trying to tell you. He's using an example of murder because that's what's on his mind.
Yeah, what he's saying is he was there. He took part in it, but he's not the murderer. It's not just him.
He's saying this situation happens a lot, as in it happens in both the child pornography and in the murder. And then he says, just because they killed them and I was there, and he says them. He doesn't say him or her in this example. He says them. So, and they say that they killed them. That doesn't mean that they killed them. This is really skirting that line of almost a confession that he was there and he was the accomplice when the two girls were murdered, but that there was this mastermind who is unnamed, it's the someone here, that was there that was coordinating it. So let's move to the next question here. Yeah, that's why we asked you initially, is there someone else that has access to your phones? And you, and he cuts him off here, because the insinuation is that there's a mastermind and that Kegan is saying, I'm not the mastermind, I'm the accomplice. And so the detective follows up with, okay, well, that's what we were saying originally, is that there's a mastermind. And Kegan says, right, but that told me how little kids and shit, I've never done that. That is actually not a sensical sentence. That's a sentence fragment, which is an indicator of sensitivity. When somebody...
Did he just say sensical? That is not a sensical sentence.
Starts to give you a sentence, especially if they start talking too soon, which means the true words have already been associated with the memory, but that person hasn't taken enough time yet to edit it, to look and say, is there anything incriminating in here? So they open their mouth and start to talk, and they start to give you the truthful words, but they realize halfway through their sentence that they haven't decided yet how they're going to edit it. They don't know what they're going to change yet or how to change what they want to change yet in the end of the sentence. And so you end up with this fragment of a sentence. He says, right. So he's agreeing with him, right. But that told me how little kids and shit, I've never done that. So he starts out by talking and then he
goes into anger and just like, you know, diarrhea of the mouth. Right. But tell me how, look, shit, fuck that shit.
halfway through his sentence and he said too much and he aggressively tries to shut himself down. You see that a lot. It's not his baseline to swear. Shit, fuck. He uses that in here, but it's always directly tied to a lie. That is called a deception tag. That means swearing in and of itself is not necessarily an indicator of deception, of sensitivity. It's an indicator of increased emotion sometimes, but you can get that from the context. Now, some people will use that when they're lying. They have certain indicators that they like to tie to things. Every individual person has their own way of deceiving. It's like a self-calming ritual when you're under the stress of being deceptive. There's a certain word that minimizes your commitment to your statement, that relaxes your brain so that you can get out the deception. Different people will choose different indicators. So one person might say just right before they lie. One person might use an explanatory statement followed by a negative statement right before they lie. It's just a matter of how your brain relaxes. Honestly, if I'm going to draw a parallel here, it's like stimming. So autistics will stim. It means they do something, a repetitive movement that they find relaxing, either fidgeting with a fidget spinner or picking at their fingernails, things like that. So a deception tag is kind of like a deception stim, but most people will have one particular word or one particular indicator that they prefer to use because it calms them more than the other indicators. So as far as this sentence goes, he says, right, but that told me how little kids, and then he just cuts himself off. And shit, I've never done that. So he doesn't know how to end the sentence. That means what he was about to say is a complete lie. He just doesn't know how to lie about it. So you get the indicators, you get the swearing. I've never done that. We already know that the word never is a huge indicator. And he says, I've never done that. That's exactly the
And we know he's done it.
way that you use it when you're being deceptive. So we don't even need to overanalyze that. He's already used the word ever when he's being deceptive. And this is another example of that. So what is he trying to say here? Let's see. The question is, that's why we asked you initially, is there someone else? Right. But that told me how little kids, and shit, I've never done that. So he says that, which is probably he doesn't want to say he or him. He says, right, but that told me how little kids. So he's starting to give you information about the mastermind that told me how little kids or how to manipulate little kids. It's hard to know exactly what's going on in his mind here that he's trying to manipulate and not say, and then he shuts himself down. So we'll go to the next question. So the detective cuts him off and says, your story changes. And then Kegan says, okay, I understand. Yeah, of course it does. Because I never did fucking stuff, little kids and stuff like that. All right, well, we have a bunch of indicators here. So your story changes. Yeah, of course it does. First, he agrees with the accusation. Your story's changing. Yeah, of course it does. And then he doesn't know where to go with that. Again, now you're starting to see his tendency, which is to start talking before he's figured out how he's going to phrase the end of the sentence, and then he has to shut himself down. And then he says because, which is an indicator of over-explaining. Because, and then he says, I never did fucking stuff, little kids and stuff like that. So all this is telling you is that he did. He has taken pictures, posed, had sex with little kids. And when he's saying little kids, later on, he refers to under about age 5 or below. So there's stuff in here with kids that are less than 5 years old. He doesn't want to be seen as somebody who does stuff to kids under 5 years old. I'm not sure why he draws the line there, but in his mind, that's the cutoff. That's where he feels guilt. So the part of himself where you get the self-loathing for what he's doing is below that age 5 level. So side note, as an interrogator, you should be noticing this here. If I was interrogating him, I would almost completely avoid talking about children 5 or below and only focus on the children in here that
The shit he's comfortable talking about. Okay, above 5 years old.
he doesn't have that mental qualm about taking pictures, posing, having sex with them, which he says, I think he says very specifically 12 years old and above is not a problem. So I would focus on that, because if you always focus on the 12, 13, 14-year-olds, you're not going to get any resistance from him. And you can still talk about a certain date or time or a certain project. I don't know what you call this, but a certain website that he's working on, whatever. You just don't include the stuff that he has that mental qualms about. But when he admits to the stuff that he doesn't have any problems with, he's also admitting, because it's all one project, it's all one day, it's all one scenario, he's also admitting to everything else. So it's just, that's a method. I'm talking about interrogation here. Like we talked about earlier, it's a way of overcoming that barrier. When you have a scale and you have the person that wants to talk, they do want to tell you everything. It helps them get it off their conscience. So if you're trying to figure out, how do I get Kegan to talk about the child pornography? Because right now, his desire to not talk is weighing down the scale here. So if you take the kids under 5 off of that scale, it moves that scale up to where he's willing to talk about it. So hopefully that gives some context to the stuff I was
Sergio's no Jerry Holman. Exactly. I totally agree with his concept there. Keep him comfortable where he's willing to talk about it. Same expert or same expert training, right, in read technique, but actually knows how to apply the knowledge.
talking about earlier. Then the detective follows up with, there's a lot of stuff with little kids, which I just told you, there's no reason to follow up on that. I mean, emotionally, the detective is upset. Most people that are in the detective's shoes are going to be emotional. But as an interrogator, it's literally your job to not get emotional. You need to be able to put that aside and just logically follow the reasoning, the logic train of the subject that you're talking to. So this follow-up question is a particularly bad one. I'm not saying that this detective is bad or that this interrogation is bad. I'm just saying this is not a question that you would want to follow up with. That's not me is what I'm saying, though. So in his mind, he is still relying on the information that he's not the mastermind. So it's on his phone. He was part of this. He was the accomplice. But there's still someone else who's driving that train, and he's going to lean on that. So we'll move on to the next question here. We would expect that, but you got to understand, we need an answer for this, right? Because it's either it's all you or it's you and someone else. Okay, that's a good follow-up question. You want it to be direct. It's either you or it's you and someone else. He's already told you that it's someone else. He's actually directly told you that it's someone else. So we want to keep following up with questions like this one. And he says, right. So again, he's agreeing with you. He's answered the question. He says, right. And he says, they told me that last time I was here too. So right is leakage. He is agreeing because the memory in his head matches the question. Then the detective says, I wasn't here last time. Dang it. You fell for it. When somebody doesn't answer the question, they answer it with a question, they try and get you off track. After you ask a question, the first thing you have to do is ask yourself, did they answer the question? And if they didn't, you have to restate the question again because they're trying to get you off track. So he says, I wasn't here last time. Now, in this case, the answer that he gets is even better than the answer to the question that he asked. So we're not upset here. Now, I wasn't here last time. Well, they're talking about the child pornography, the pictures, whether or not he was the mastermind of the pictures, of the whole porn ring. So Kegan says, after the question, I wasn't here last time, or the statement, Kegan says, killing 2 girls. That's what they said to me.
Whoa, I missed that. I missed that when I studied that transcript. Did you guys all miss that? Like there was so much there and so much I was concerned with. I actually missed this particular response from Kegan. Proving that they were interrogating him last time about killing 2 girls. Continue. Carry on, Sergio.
They tried to say that I failed a polygraph and that I did it, me or my dad. So do you understand?
Me or my dad. They tried to say I failed a polygraph and I did it, me or my dad. Ooh, Lord, have freaking mercy. Whew.
How I kind of have like a kind of like presence where like, wow, these guys are bullshit artists. You get where I'm coming from. When I saw this, I was like, ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. Actually, we have a killer. This is it. There's a confession in here. So let's look at this from every angle. First off, the statement that he's responding to is, I wasn't here last time, which is not a question. It's not even a statement. The detective's talking about himself. I wasn't here last time. So there's literally no prompting for anything. An honest person would be sitting there waiting for the detective to ask something. This is dangerous if you're guilty, to open your mouth when there's not a question asked, because what's weighing on your mind is the only thing there. It's the only thing that's circulating in your head in that moment. So giving that words and throwing it out of your mouth is always a bad idea if you're guilty and you just start talking. But as an interrogator, that's what we're looking for. Interrogators work their entire careers to figure out how to open someone up like this. So he says, unprompted, killing 2 girls, that's what they said to me. Okay, killing 2 girls isn't a statement. He had killed 2 girls is what he was trying to say, but he didn't want to say that because it's a confession. So he changed that wording in the beginning. Then he says, because now his brain has gotten ahead. The Broca section doing the analysis has gotten ahead of his prefrontal cortex. So now he says, they tried to say that I failed a polygraph, but really what he says here is I failed a polygraph and that I did it. So now you get the confession. He says, I did it. Then he adds in me or my dad. So now he's telling you
Me and my dad. Me and my dad.
who the mastermind is and who he is an accomplice for, me or my dad, which he's telling you that as in that's the context of what he was accused of last time. But again, remember, when we're talking about things that are weighing on our mind and we shouldn't be talking about them, but for some reason, we just can't stop talking about it because it's weighing on our mind. It's literally how we're programmed to function. So, and then he continues, so do you understand how I kind of like, now what he's trying to do is gaslight them. He's insinuating. He never says that this was a false accusation. He never says that he passed the polygraph, but they lied to him and said he failed it. He is saying they made these accusations and the insinuation is that the accusations were false. So because he's insinuating that and he's not saying it, it means that the accusations were true. So we get that as well in here.
Holy fucking shit. This is a really good supplement to Reese Davis's statements.
And then he goes on to ask 2 more questions, which is a way of deflecting. So do you understand how I kind of have like a kind of presence? That's a question, but now he's also trying to turn this back on the detective and saying, you're incompetent, you go down these roads where you're wrong, except he never actually says that they're wrong. He just insinuates it. So we have, what was that, 6 indicators? We have a confession to failing the polygraph, a confession to the murders. He brings up the murders unprompted. He tells you that it's him and his dad are the accomplices. When I first saw this, when I was going through this, I figuratively fell out of my chair, but I very close to literally fell out of my chair.
Dude, I'm literally falling out of my chair right now. I mean, I don't know about you guys. You know, like I said, looking at this under a microscope with an expert eye, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. We have a killer or 2 under the microscope, and they've been allowed to walk free.
Because up to this point, the only thing that I really knew was that Richard Allen didn't do any of this, that he had no idea that those murders even happened that day on the bridge until they came out in the media. And so when I saw this, it's hard to explain because it all hits me at the same time. All of this information is right here. The detectives have it. The police have it. Everybody has this.
And nobody wants to fucking do a thing about it because it's a massive cover-up. The Delphi murders is a cover-up of epic proportions. And you have to ask yourselves why.
There's no question here. It's not even like they're talking to an average Joe. They're talking to the guy who is being charged with being the largest distributor and producer of child pornography in the state of Indiana's history.
Who was there that day
history. Now, the only thing left for me is, what is the connection? The prosecutor said in that press conference that there was a connection. They found Kegan Kline because of the connection to the murders. But then
Because his account was responsible for the victims being at the crime scene that day.
they charged him with the child pornography and they dropped the whole murder investigation. So this is killing me. They have a confession.
That was the cover up. That was the cover up. Put him down for the CSAM and cover this goddamn thing up.
Right in front of them. They have all the information right in front of them. But at this point, the only thing left for me is I want to know the connection. So let's keep going through this. Okay, so Emily Ann 45 is one of Kegan's aliases or fake accounts online. So I put this in here for a little bit of context as to what he was doing. And then also because there's an important part at the end of this. It says, so the detective is reading what he posted basically on his account. He says, well, as he's talking to someone, he says, I just checked my Kik messages. Haha. My little cousin must have accidentally sent me a video of her. Oh my God. And then he says, Emily Ann sends a picture and says, that's the detective saying that. She just got naked and rubbed. Haha. It's hot as fuck. She's super young though. Emoji sad face. She didn't mean to send it to me. What's your deal? Said she didn't like that Emily Ann called another girl hot as fuck. And then Emily Ann says, she's my cousin. Then it ends. Another one that comes up on the iPhone, another Kik one. Now, this is September 7th, 2016, with a 13-year-old girl. Emily Ann, what's up? My dad asked your age limit. He said you're gorgeous. He asked if it's wrong to like little girls like you. And the response is, it's okay, emoji laughing face. I highlighted in here because Kegan says, my dad asked your age limit, meaning that he's trying to find a little girl who's willing to have sex with his dad. And he wants to know if she's willing to have sex with somebody as old as his dad. This is conversations from the...
Boom. Boom. Now, we pointed this out at the time we went through this. Absolutely. Boom.
retrieved information from his phone. So this isn't something that he said to police at some point. Kegan is literally in there seeking a 13-year-old girl to hook up with his dad. And he's clearly acting at the behest of his father here, trying to hook him up, which supports the idea that Kegan is working for his father, that his father is the mastermind and that Kegan is the accomplice, whatever. All right, so let's go to the next question. Your exact same words were, yes, I do, and I'm so fucked. And Kegan says, yeah, because that's the polygrapher, telling me I just killed 2 people and I failed my polygraph. Now, there's a continuation of the questioning that we started above, but it was interrupted by reading those texts in the interview. Okay, so they go back to this. Your exact same words were, yes, I do, and I'm so fucked. And he says, yeah, I said that. Yeah. Because she, which is the polygrapher, is telling me I just killed 2 people and I failed my polygraph. So he's agreeing. Why the detective is saying she said this and you said I'm so fucked. So he's asking, why did you say I'm so fucked if you weren't guilty just because she accused you? And he says, yeah, because she said that I killed 2 people and I failed my polygraph. So he doesn't answer the question. He just restates it. But we have a second confession in here. He says, I just killed 2 people. It's a second confession. Now, if you just randomly come across a confession and there's no other indicators around it, then you still want to verify that. You still want to find more indicators. You still want context for a deception. Like I said, a statement has to scream deception. Now, when you find a confession that's usually pretty solid, you still want more just to get a warm fuzzy about understanding the full picture. Here we have a second confession, and this is just riddled. It's just filled with indicators. So there's no question what's going on. At this point, it is crystal clear what the truth is, but there's still a lot more. So let's keep going. All right. So we have a continuation of the confession and the I just killed 2 people and I failed the polygraph. So his continuation here is, yeah, no, I'm not really a big drinker because, so we have a negative plus an explanatory, that's deception. So he is a big drinker. And he says, because I have seizures and stuff. So I don't like drinking. Okay, we have another explanatory plus a negative. So I don't like drinking a lot. He says a lot. That's a qualifier. That means that he does drink, just not now. He puts out an arbitrary word, a lot. So what his definition of a lot could be, what, 60 beers in one night? I mean, what is a lot? So he says, I mean, it was fun. It was super cool. And you know what I mean? All right. So we have, I mean, you know what I mean. This repetition of these indicators is an indicator of huge sensitivity. So we're actually walking into an extremely sensitive area. When people add in a bunch of words and they string out the length of time that it takes to say what they don't want to say, it's because it's deceptive. It's a lie that's coming up, and it's so nerve-wracking that they don't want to get there. They're trying to slow walk to the deception. And then I get taken down there. They tell me I killed 2 people. So we have a third confession now. I killed 2 people. I failed the polygraph because I'm freaking out, and you know what I mean? All right, so now we have a third confession. We have huge sensitivity around this. We have massive indicators throughout this entire statement. So why do we have all of these indicators? And he says, they tell me I killed 2 people. I failed the polygraph. The insinuation here is the deception. They tell me that I did this. He's insinuating that he didn't. When you insinuate something but you don't say it, it means the insinuation is the opposite of the truth. It means that he did kill the 2 people. But we already know that because he says, I killed 2 people. So we already have the confession in here anyways. And we have all of this sensitivity surrounding it. Why? Because in his mind, he's building up a bunch of angst to insinuating that he didn't kill them. But the longer that he talks about this, the more vivid that memory becomes, and the harder it becomes to lie about it. So that's why as he talks about it more and more, you see more and more indicators, and you see these, you know what I mean? I killed 2 people. I failed the polygraph because you know what I mean? So he's swimming in stress right now. And then the detective says, the Delphi investigation, we found things that you weren't honest about either. And Kegan says, what do you mean? And so the interrogator says, you had told investigators, and I know you say you don't remember a girl that you ever talked to, but I know you remember Liberty German, right? And you talked to her, and you admitted to talking to her. And okay, this is important because this is about to create a link that we were looking for before.
Okay. How's that for the first half? How's that for the first half? Now, do you guys see what I mean about taking a closer look, a very close look, through the lens of the eyes of an expert, considering, not swallowing, not believing, considering what he said, his observations, looking at his reactions. As he said, he almost fell out of his chair, just like I did. It's really something. Where are the feds? I want to thank everyone who's in the chat right now. Thanks for being here. Thank you for the support. Those of you who are giving support. Thank you for the input. All of you guys who are chatting in there. I'm putting your chats up on the screen. Amazing input tonight. Thank you very much, guys. Now we're going to go into part 2 here. He's not done. He's not done.
And then the detective says, the Delphi investigation, we found things that you weren't honest about either. And Kegan says, what do you mean? And so the interrogator says, you had told investigators, and I know you say you don't remember a girl that you ever talked to, but I know you remember Liberty German, right? And you know you talked to her and you admitted to talking to her. And okay, this is important because this is about to create a link that we were looking for before. And then Kegan says, I don't think I ever did though. I think I talked to one of her friends.
Who, her sister? What's going on here, Kegan Kline?
Like I told them. So in this statement alone, we have I don't think, which is a negative statement followed by a reduction of commitment. I don't think. Anytime somebody says I don't think something happened, it means it happened. It's just too hard for them to lie. They can't say it didn't happen. So they say I don't think I ever. Ever is another indicator of deception. I don't think I ever did though. I think, so now it's the third indicator of deception right here. I talked to one of her friends like I told them. So now he's referencing a previous statement. We have 4 indicators of deception in here, which means he did talk to her. He knows he talked to her, and he's trying to lie by saying that he talked to her friend. He may have talked to her friend at some point, but he also did directly talk to her, which is what the question is, which is why you're getting the sensitivity. So the fact that he's lying doesn't mean that he didn't talk to the friend. It just means that he did talk to Liberty German. But can we figure out?
Yeah, well, we know he was talking to Kyla Brummett as well at the sleepover, a week or two before, right? You guys forgot about the sleepover?
What they talked about? Yeah, let's keep going. You admitted that you talked to her for a few hours at a sleepover, and then you blocked her because she was annoying. You remember that? And Kegan thinks about it and says, you're right. Yeah, okay. We're doing all this deception detection, and then he just admits to it. So what do we get from this? We have the admission of a lie. This is nice for us, though, because it means that these indicators that we're finding, the way that he lies, it reinforces, it reaffirms that this is, in fact, how he lies.
Yeah, you're on the trail. You're on his trail. You're confirming that what you're following and picking up on, these breadcrumbs, you're confirming that you're right. Good job.
Now, I know that I like to see the admission because it makes it crystal clear in your mind that he did lie. He lied about that because he says he lied about it right here. You remember that? You're right. Yeah. Okay. So we're all on the same page here. He's been lying because he just admitted it. In going through with a fine-tooth comb, that's not what happened. Okay. Now this is beginning to ramp up. So actually, I want to pause this for a second. In the Richard Allen interrogation, that interrogator was terrified to ask a direct question because he didn't want a denial. He didn't want the subject to deny anything that he was saying. And that is something that it only happens to somebody who is brand new in interrogation, who is afraid that they're not going to know what questions to ask if somebody denies it. Now, his discomfort of being in there may have had to do with the fact that he was absolutely aware of this interrogation, and he already knew that Kegan Kline was guilty. So he went into that interrogation knowing that he had an innocent man there, and that it was his job during that interrogation to coerce a confession, or at least try and set up an interrogation that looked good enough for the jury to convict him. So
which is called entrapment. That was Holman's job during Richard Allen's interrogation. Sergio hit the nail on the head on that one.
Digress a little bit. Let's get back to this at hand here. He says, in going through with a fine-tooth comb, that's not what happened. And Kegan says, yep, you're right. That is not what happened. So again, we have an admission that he did talk to Liberty German for the 4 hours at the sleepover. But when was that sleepover? Let's see if we can figure that out. And I'm telling you right now, you did not just talk to them during a sleepover. You said, I didn't exchange any pictures with them. So he's quoting him from the interview before. And we know that you add an in there. We always cut ums out. It has nothing to do with deception ever. So it just means that your brain is thinking, and it can be thinking about truth or deception. And so we have to cut it out. But I didn't exchange any pictures with them, so we know that he did.
I sound familiar. You guys picking up what I'm putting down? I.
3 eyes is an indicator of deception. So he did. And then he says, I don't think I ever did. So that's the answer. So he's reading him his previous statement. And then Kegan says, I don't think I ever did. Well, this is a known lie. So when he says, I don't think I ever, he has used that to lie numerous times now that we have verification on. So this is called a known lie. So at this point, we don't need to analyze this. Anytime he says, I don't think I ever, that is absolutely that he did, which means he knows that he was sending pictures.
Because I don't think is softening. Think about it. When you don't want to directly lie, I never did. So you soften that lie with I don't think I ever did.
To Liberty German. Now, this is the part that's tough for people to talk about. There's a connection. This conversation happened within a 4-day period leading up to Liberty German's murder. So Kegan was regularly in contact. We have learned that through what we've just seen. And we're going to get a lot more information on what they were talking about, sending pictures back and forth. It's very socially uncomfortable to acknowledge something like that about the murder victim, especially.
Yeah, but they were sending nudes. Okay, they were sending pictures.
Because she was a child. Let's keep going, because if you're not convinced yet, you will be. I'm telling you that's fact, you did, okay? Because the Anthony Shots persona, that's the fake account. Okay, so now there's numerous accounts. Anthony Shot, remember, that is the account that was mentioned by the reporter during the police press conference after Richard Allen's conviction. So that account is what the press was following. It's what the public was following. And now he's talking about it. The Anthony Shots persona, that's the fake account. And Kegan says, right, yes, that is the account that he was communicating with Liberty German. Okay, that you admitted to communicated with Liberty German on Snapchat, on Instagram. And like I said, it was not just for a couple hours. And Kegan,
You admitted to making communicated with Liberty German on Snapchat, on Instagram, and it was not just for a couple of hours, and photos were exchanged and money.
says, right, yes, he confirms now that he was communicating with her for an extended period of time. And we need to clarify that, because right now what we can officially go with is you saying that, but we know for a fact it was a lie because we have the data, you know. And Kegan says, right. Remember before he said he didn't talk to Liberty, he only talked to her friend, and it was only for a short period of time while they were at the sleepover. And then 15 times now, he has admitted, yes, that was a lie. So just want you to remember the context here. So how did you meet Liberty German? You didn't meet in person, but how did you? And then Kegan says, I don't know. I don't know. I had to be on Instagram or something. Literally, I don't know. Or they're now known indicators of deception, because when he says, I don't know, what he's saying is, I remember very clearly, but I don't want to say it. And then he says it had to be on Instagram or something. Now, why, if they already know that they met on Instagram and there's other secret sites, not secret, but Meet Me is the site that they were using to do like the naked pictures and stuff like that. So he doesn't want to say that it was on Meet Me. And he also doesn't want to say that he ended up seeing her in person. So this topic becomes very sensitive about talking about their interaction. That's why he says, I don't know. I don't know. I had to be on Instagram or something. So it was on Instagram.
Y'all hearing this? Am I the only one hearing this? Can we back that up like 30 seconds or a minute? Clear your ears out. Clear your ears out. We need to hear this again. All right. We need to hear this again. Hold on. Hold the fuck up. Hold on. Apologize, but Jesus, man.
I don't know, or they're now known indicators of deception, because when he says, I don't know, what he's saying is, I remember very clearly, but I don't want to say it. And then he says it had to be on Instagram or something. Now, why, if they already know that they met on Instagram and there's other secret sites, not secret, but Meet Me is the site that they were using to do like the naked pictures and stuff like that. So he doesn't want to say that it was on Meet Me. And he also doesn't want to say that he ended up seeing her in person. So this topic becomes very sensitive about talking about their interaction. That's why he says, I don't know. I don't know. I had to be on Instagram or something. So
This is probably a lot of the shit that he deleted, right, and destroyed. Like some of the shit that Sergio is referring to is shit that was likely destroyed by Kegan.
it was on Instagram. They already knew Instagram, but then he adds or something. I hope you're seeing this. I hope you're understanding how hard it is to lie. When I say it is virtually impossible to lie, I mean it is virtually impossible to lie. He is right now being accused of a double homicide. If he could just straight up lie about this, if he could just say, I didn't do that, then he would. But he can't. That's just not how the human brain works. And so he says, I had to be on Instagram or something. So that or something is an overgeneralizing. It's a mitigator to what he said on Instagram. That means there is other platforms and he doesn't want to tell you. And the I don't know, now he adds in literally. So now we know that when he says, I don't know, literally, I don't know, that becomes a known lie. It's like a deception tag, but it's called a known lie. Okay, it was on Instagram. And then Kegan says, yeah, well, that's the one he wants you to know about. Okay, so she added you on Instagram. When was that, would you say? Kegan says, I literally have no clue. Okay, we already know literally is a deception tag here. So he literally does have a clue. I literally have no clue. I don't remember. Okay, talking to her, really. Okay, so we got 4 indicators here. I didn't even know who she really was until after I saw that on the news. And I was like, oh, wow, that name, like, I remembered that name. Okay, this is important here because this is the first time in his statement that we have a missing time statement. Now, if you watch my other videos, you see a lot of missing time statements. The comment that I see the most is people say, I use that all the time. The word after, I use that all the time. It doesn't mean missing time. The thing is, you don't actually remember the words that you say. If I was to say 2 days ago, when you were having a conversation with so-and-so, tell me the exact words that you used in that conversation. There's no possible way. You don't know the actual words that you used. What you're referencing is that word is something that's familiar to you. And you know that you have said it at some point in your life, and there is truthful ways of using the word. But when you look at the context and it's surrounded by indicators, it tells you something very specific, which is missing time. So in this case, what is the missing time? What is the big jump in time that's cut out? Where did we start and where do we end up? He says, was until after I saw that on the news and I was like, oh, wow.
Oh, so the missing time is from the time you're talking to her to until after you saw it on the news. Okay, so you're talking to her, and there's a huge chunk of missing time until after you see it on the news? Missing time? What were you, abducted or something? Is this some alien abduction scenario, Kegan?
So it's her murder. He cut out her murder. He literally is talking when she's alive, the word after, and then she's dead. And so he very specifically cut out, using the word after, her murder. That means he's involved. The area that he cut out, the murder, was cut out because he was involved in it. That's why missing time is such an important indicator for me. All right, and then it's just surrounded with other indicators. Lots of reduction of commitment. We have really, really, like, and then we have I literally, I don't remember. So all of these indicators about his relationship with her. But the most important thing is we have all of this deception about before her murder and after her murder. And then he cut out. Her murder out of this statement. So that's what we get from that statement right there. Again, that's a lie too, because we know that for a fact that when you were in Vegas, that on your device, you were searching about the Delphi investigations. So right after the murder, Kegan left and went to Vegas. He says it was just a party for a weekend. You don't think that maybe he was trying to get out of Dodge, trying to get out of town after committing 2 murders?
Of course he was.
Yeah, obviously. But for some reason, unless somebody tells you, I got in the car after I murdered 2 little girls and drove to Vegas so that I could get away from the police. Unless people say that to you for some reason, it's like it doesn't exist. So yeah, that's what happened. He went to Vegas for his party weekend, and then he sat there and searched, because they have his phone records. The whole time that he was there, he was searching the Delphi investigation. And Kegan says, yeah, because that's like right by our, you know what I mean? That's someone getting killed right out here. Be like, what the fuck? What does that mean? Can you feel the turmoil that is in his brain right now?
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is the path that begun. You know, because that's like right by our, you know what I mean? That's like someone getting killed right out here. Like, be like, what the fuck?
Because we have now gotten to the murder. So the murder has happened. There's, even when the murder is weighing on your brain, there's an element of, you know, when I'm telling you to think about a time that was a week before the murder, it allows your shift of focus to take you somewhere else. So even though the murder is still weighing, you're actually thinking about a different act, and it allows you to more clearly describe the act that happened a week before. Once we get to the murder, you start to see this, it just turns into nonsense. So let me read that again. Yeah, because that's like right by our, you know what I mean? That's someone getting killed right out here. Be like, what the fuck? So we have sentence fragments. We have the word fuck, which means that he is forcibly shutting himself down because he feels like he's giving away too much information. And that swearing is an indicator of deception for us, but very specifically, it's an indicator that he has started to talk. He doesn't know how to end the sentence. He feels like he might accidentally give away truth, and so he shuts himself down. And then, you know what I mean, is a typical deception tag for him. Okay, it's a news article that you looked at on Safari. Tips pour in after suspect identified in Delphi double homicide. New details in the Delphi killings to be released. The audio clip, do you remember the audio clip? He says, right. Yes, I remember the audio clip. How many times would you say that you listened to it? Oh, I don't know. Probably a few. I'm not sure. Okay, so he took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words that were all indicators of deception just to wrap up a little package around a few, which means that it was way more than a few times. So what do we learn here? How many times did you listen to the audio? There's an audio recording of some back and forth between the girls on the bridge and their killer. And so when that was released to the public, you can't tell what they're saying at all. It's, you know, very grainy, garbled, whatever. It's a poor recording, but he's very sensitive about it. And he doesn't want to admit that he listened to it more than a few times. Why? Remember, we got to ask ourselves, 1, did they answer the question? And 2, why did they answer the question the way that they did? He is extremely sensitive about listening to it more than a few times. Why? If you're still thinking, no, he is innocent. Kegan Kline is an innocent man. I'm 100% sure that Richard Allen is guilty. Therefore, he's innocent. So why is he sensitive about this? This doesn't even have to do with the murders. Unless you're the killer. In a situation like this, I would have listened to the audio 100 times. And if you asked me, because I'm investigating it, if you asked me how many times have you listened to the audio, I would say at least 100, because I know the truth, and the truth doesn't mean I'm a killer. So I'm not sensitive about that. But if the truth is that you're a killer, then you can only think that there would be one reason why you'd listen to it 100 times. And that's for the actual reason that you were listening to it, which is to see if you can identify your own voice on the tape. That's why he's so sensitive about it. Okay, a few, as in like 1 or 2. Kegan says, I don't know, indicator. I mean, indicator. Trying to hear the guy's voice, see what he said. I don't know, indicator. Probably, indicator. 5 or 6, probably, indicator. I don't know, indicator. Again, extreme sensitivity around the number of times, and it went from a few to 5 or 6. So he listened to it a lot more than 6 times, and my guess is probably 100. And we clearly know why he was listening to it. Okay, this next section we're going to get into, it really gives clarity on Kegan Kline's role. So was Kegan Kline the mastermind? Was his father the mastermind? What did he know in all of this before the murders happened?
Yeah, this whole concept of mastermind. How is Richard Allen? Okay, if Richard Allen is the killer of these girls in Delphi, how is there a mastermind at all? Okay, if he's walking drunk, wants to sexually assault and laid in wait to prey on two young women, where's the mastermind concept coming from? The only way a mastermind would be involved in these murders if it was something other than the state's current narrative says, right? That's where a mastermind would come into play. You don't have a mastermind for a random boomer getting drunk, having a few beers, and suddenly deciding to assault some young girls on the trail in the woods. There's no mastermind in that. Sorry.
Let's look at this. So, not just people dying, a person that you literally talked to. And Kegan says, yeah, but I didn't realize that at the time that that's who I was talking to. Okay, there's actually no indicators in here. I didn't realize that at the time. He doesn't say I didn't know. He says I didn't realize that at the time that that's who I was talking to. So the way that this is phrased, not just people dying, a person that you literally talked to, the implication from the question is that he spent the weekend in Vegas Googling the Delphi murders, which is obviously guilty as hell. And then the implication here is it's not just a random person, it's somebody that you literally talked to right up until the time of the murders. So he says, yeah, but I didn't realize that at the time that that's who I was talking to. So when he says, I didn't realize that at the time, the implication there is that that's when he was in Vegas. I didn't realize that at the time that that's who I was talking to. But that doesn't make any sense, because why would it matter? He's saying that he spent the entire weekend on a party trip to Vegas Googling the Delphi murders because it was somebody that he didn't know. That his response doesn't actually make sense as an answer to the question, which makes me look at it to see, is he living in the memory here? Is he pulling this from his memory? Which he is, but what does that tell us about this answer here? He says, I didn't realize that at the time that that's who I was talking to. It sounds like he's saying at the time of the murder. Yeah, but I didn't realize that at the time that that's who I was talking to, which means at the time that he met her on the bridge, that he didn't realize that that was Liberty German. He didn't realize that that was the girl that he had been talking to for the 4 days leading up to that point. So that's interesting, because there's this question about who is the mastermind here. Is Kegan Kline the mastermind, or is he just working sort of as an accomplice for his father? Now, we know, we're going to find out in a little bit, that the police, through forensic analysis, and the FBI has looked at this too, was helping with this case, that they determined that the way that they were writing, the syntax of how they write in the chat groups and use of emojis and things like that, that there's two different people that were writing, which is clearly Kegan and his father. They use the same accounts to talk to girls and groom them and set them up to send naked pictures and videos and stuff. Okay. So is it possible that Kegan, even though he had been messaging with Liberty German over the 4 days leading up, including right before the meeting, that he didn't know that he was meeting them there? That would mean that it was actually the father that set up the meeting and took Kegan there. So this sort of goes back to the original question that we saw in the beginning, that he was the accomplice, that he was there, that he's basically said in that question that his father killed the girls, and he was there and he helped, but he didn't actually kill them, that he didn't actually stab them. And here, this sort of supports that. And so let's look at the next question. How do you not? And then he says, because I don't think I mean, like I said, I talked to a ton of people. So we got a bunch of indicators. We got an explanatory plus a negative plus reduction of commitment plus reduction of commitment plus reduction of commitment. So huge lie. And then he says, I said I talked to a ton of people. So he talks to a ton of people, but how do you not know? What's the lie? He talks to a ton of girls, yeah, but how does he not know? Because his father is the one that set up the meeting. So that's how he would actually not know. That's why it's so sensitive. The big question here in my mind is, why is he protecting his father so much? And let's go on to the next question. What else do we get here? Okay, then Isle and Kegan says, and then, like, once I realized, I was like, whoa, what the fuck? So now again, back to, is this him at the murder scene? Once I realized who they had killed, I was like, whoa, what the fuck? This all fits right in with this narrative that he's sort of creating for us right here. Just question after question fits this narrative. When would you say you realized that it was Liberty German, the girl that you were talking to, was killed? Now, the detective is thinking in his hotel room in Vegas, but Kegan is not living in that memory. He's living in the memory of the murder right now. And Kegan says, I don't know, in a lie, probably a reduction of commitment. I mean, it's another reduction of commitment, a little bit, and then we have after. Remember the last time he used the word after, he cut out the murder. So after now is specifically used by Kegan to cut out the murder. A little bit after, probably happening. I mean, that's a reduction of commitment, probably a reduction of commitment after, and then, so we have the cutting out of the murder. It happened, and I saw like her face and saw her name. Then, okay, let's look at the
That's a bunch of stuttering. I mean, I don't know, probably mean a little bit after probably happening. I mean, probably after it happened, and like I saw for her face and her name,
context of the question. So the question is talking about in Vegas, in his hotel room, and he's saying after, and the insinuation here is that I don't even know what the insinuation is, because he's just telling you the truth here. At this point, if you're following from the three questions before, I don't even know what I don't think there's even a part of his brain that even has a connection to the question at this point. I think he's just completely in his own mind. He says, so when did you realize that it was Liberty German? I want you to understand, if you murdered that little girl, you've got the image of her being dead, her dead face, the blood. I mean, you've got that whole thing burned into your brain. And so it's going to be impossible to not be reliving that moment. You can't get that moment out of your head when you're trying to answer a question like this. Now, what does he say? When did you realize that it was Liberty German? But he is not even thinking about watching the news. He's thinking about looking at her face on the ground right there. He says, I don't know. Probably, I mean, a little bit after. A little bit after means a little bit after the murder. A little bit after they were dead. Probably happening. A little bit after probably happening. I mean, probably after it happened. And I saw like her face, and I saw her name then. So that the only thing in here that even has a semblance of tying back to Vegas is when he says, I saw her name then. But you get this really powerful image of him looking at her on the ground dead after the murder here. And I saw her face, and then I saw her name. So I don't know. This is pretty chilling for me. All right, the next question here. Okay, and then you told investigators that you had never talked to anybody. And he says, yeah, I don't remember talking to her. I remember talking to one of her friends.
Kelsey, Bree, Kyla. Who do you remember talking to, Kegan? Who's the friend, quote unquote? Why is there money changing hands? Why are there nudes changing hands? Are we really gonna ever fucking talk about what really happened?
I thought, okay, they already established this. I'm taking these questions in order. So we already established this, and he already admitted to it. So we saw a bunch of indicators, and then he admitted to talking to her. So he has just gone back, because now that he has just relived the murders, he is now trying to redistance himself again, having completely forgot that they've already addressed this. And he says, yeah, I don't remember talking to her. I remember talking to one of her friends, I thought. Okay, so we already addressed this, so we know he's lying. And then you just said you remembered talking to her, the detective says. And Kegan says, well, that's what I remember, her being there, like with her friend, but I don't remember ever talking to her. Okay, so he's confused now, because Kegan is not remembering that they just had this conversation. I mean, in the interview, it was probably 45 minutes before, but he's trying to think of verbal judo here, where he's trying to not answer that question. So interrogator says, That's not what you said. I'm telling you what you told investigators was you had talked to her the night of the sleepover. And then Kegan says, this is 3 years ago. I mean, I don't remember everything I told them. You know what I mean? Why would I think about that? That was the most traumatic experience of my life. And telling me that I killed people. So yeah, why would I ever think about that? Okay, let's think about the context here. Kegan just relived the murder, literally just relived the murder in like 2 questions ago. And now the detective is saying 45 minutes ago, you said that you did talk to her, but that conversation, that part of this is not even in his mind anymore. So what he's answering is a little in left field. And he says, this is 3 years ago.
3 years, 3 years before this interview. What was it? Kathy Shank? Was it Kathy Shank? I think it was.
So Kegan is back to as if it was the first time being asked. He's like trying to deny it for the first time, forgetting that he already denied it in this conversation and then admitted to it. So he says, this is 3 years ago. I mean, I don't remember. That's a lie. Everything I told them. You know what I mean? That's another indicator. It's a lie. Why would I think about that? That's a question. Asking a question in an answer is an indicator of deception. Why would I think about that? Now he throws this in there. This statement is in here because he just relived the murder. And he says, that was the most traumatic experience of my life. The murder, committing the murder, that was the most traumatic experience of his life.
Boom, boom, boom. Committing or witnessing or participating in the murders was the most fucking traumatic experience of your life. Not talking to Kathy Shank.
Life. That's what he's telling you. And telling me that I killed people. So let's back up here. This is 3 years ago. I mean, I don't remember everything I told them. You know what I mean? Why would I think about that? That was the most traumatic experience of my life. And telling me that I killed people. So yeah, why would I ever think about that? He has gone off the rails. And the insinuation here is that he jumped back to the polygraph telling him that he killed people. And so he's insinuating here that talking to the polygrapher was the most traumatic experience of his life, which doesn't make any sense. If you're an innocent person and you're talking to a polygrapher, I mean, that would be stressful, but not the most traumatic experience of your life. All right, so what does he say? He says that was the most traumatic experience.
Let's see. He was beat. He was raped. He was beat. He was raped. He was beat. He was raped. And talking to Kathy Shank is the most traumatic experience of your life. No, no, no. How about being a part of the Delphi murders or witnessing or participating? Now that would qualify as something traumatic, right? The most traumatic experience of my life.
Of my life, and telling me that I killed people. So he's telling you, I killed people. That's what, is that his 4th confession? Direct confession in here? 4th or 5th? I can't remember. And then, but that's tied directly to that was the most traumatic experience of my life, that I killed people. So I don't know. It seems pretty clear. Seems pretty crystal clear what's going on here, because it was a traumatic experience. And then Kegan says, why would I want to revisit them telling me that I failed a polygraph? All right. So now just trying to circle around. I mean, the detective's just pointing out that what he said doesn't make any sense. And then he's just trying to double down on it. That was the most traumatic experience of my life. The polygrapher telling me that I failed. Then why lie to investigators about it? And he says, I really didn't think I did. Just a lie. Why did you tell them that you only talked to her one night when that? And he says, because that's probably all I remembered. I mean, like I said, I talked to hundreds of people. I don't remember talking to one girl. You know what I mean? And he says, just one girl that got killed. All right. So this is literally just a jumble of indicators. There's not even a point in here. Why did you tell them that you only talked to her one night? He says, because that's probably all I remembered. That, to a completely untrained person, that's clearly a lie. That's probably all I remembered. Like, you don't remember if you remembered, is what he's saying. Then he says, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I's here. I mean, like I said, I talked to hundreds of people. I don't remember talking to one girl. You know what I mean? Just one girl that got killed. I mean, that whole thing is a lie. And one of the girls that got killed you talked to, including the day of. So now we're getting to, you talked to Liberty German the day she died. There was contact in those accounts. Now, we're not 100% sure whether it was Kegan or his father who actually was messaging her, but that account was in contact with Liberty German the day she died. And he says, okay, then, I mean, a lot of people get killed and then people talk to them. What do you mean? That doesn't mean that I killed them. Okay, he's gone back to this circular argument of lots of people talked to her the day she died. It doesn't mean everybody who talked to her killed them. That is not a denial to the accusation here. One of the girls that got killed you talked to, including the day of. Now, unfortunately, that is not a direct accusation. He should have followed that with a question, because that's just a comment. But I don't know if he cut him off or he just starts talking. Okay, then, I mean, a lot of people get killed and then people talk to them. What do you mean? That doesn't mean that I killed them. So there's no denial to the accusation. There's an insinuation that he didn't. The opposite of the insinuation is what's going to be true, which is that he did kill them. And then we have a fifth confession. I killed them. So that's the fifth time that he has said that so far. You said you'd never sent her any images. He says, I don't think I ever did. This is a lie. I don't think I ever is his deception tag. So that's a lie. They were sending pictures back and forth. And he says,
they were sending pictures back and forth. Now, Kegan's not sending pictures of himself, right? He's sending photos of that cop. But he's receiving.
there's this image here that you sent her in a Ferrari that says inaudible sports car. He says, yeah, because I have a Ferrari. So he says, I didn't send her any pictures. Then he says, yeah, because I have a Ferrari. And then the investigator says, well, Anthony Schatz did. That's the account. And he pulled pictures of Ferraris as if they were his. Then Kegan says, okay, that's weird. It's almost like Kegan is confusing his real identity with his online identity. And that's just interesting. I don't know that it necessarily means anything in here, but it's interesting to see. So Kegan Kline was not talking to Liberty German. Anthony Schatz was, right? Now the investigator's getting confused as to if he's confused about his own identity. And he says, yeah, right. So Anthony Schatz, so when they were asking you, did you send her images? You said no, because you didn't, but Anthony Schatz did. And he says, no, because I don't remember sending them anything. Okay. So the investigator is trying to figure out, do you have multiple personality disorder here? Are you telling me that you don't know that you're confusing your identities? And he says, no, because I don't remember sending them anything. So Kegan sort of answers the question, no, I'm not confusing my identities. I'm saying that I don't remember sending anything. I'm not saying that I sent it as Anthony Schatz, which is why I don't remember as Kegan, why I don't remember doing that. He says it's not that. He says, I just don't remember sending them anything. It's weird, but whatever. Okay, well, I'm telling you.
We call that selective memory, right? Selective memory.
Here's 3 right off the bat. Here's another one. Here's a couple more, actually. So now he said it. These are all pictures that had gone back and forth between Anthony Schatz and Liberty German. So there's still a question in my mind of who was behind the wheel of Anthony Schatz. And then here's one sent specifically to her, which means they can tell that it wasn't sent to anybody else. Is it bad that I'm super into you? And then Kegan says, like I would say to every one of those girls, I mean, it was the same thing with every one of those girls. So he's saying, like, is it bad that I'm super into you? He's like, I said that to everybody. It doesn't mean that I was in love with her. So there's some indicators here of reduction of commitment. So he's using a general, I would send these to everybody. He's not denying it. He's not saying that he didn't send it directly to her. But I think he's trying to insinuate that he wasn't in love with her. And then detective says, but it happened. And then Kegan says, but it happened. Okay, yeah. So yeah, now he's admitting that he did send pictures, because before he said he didn't. So just like talking to Liberty German is a fact. And then Kegan says, right. So now, again, we went through this whole process where he denies it and then he admits it. And then again, he denies it later on in the interview, but then again, he admits it again. Okay, it's a fact that you're communicating to her multiple days at a time, including up to the day that she went missing, right before. And what I want to know is, you would communicate with her on what? The iPhone 5 was your primary device, right? And he says, yeah. So Kegan just confirmed that yes, he was communicating with Liberty German right up to the point before she died. Now, the one thing that we don't know is whether or not Anthony Schatz was being controlled by Kegan or by his father. So we have an admission that he is aware that there was communication between Liberty German and Anthony Schatz leading right up to the murders. Now, it's possible that he wasn't the one who was sending the messages. It's possible that after he realized who they had killed, I mean, him and his dad are there. So there's this whole process. They got to stage the bodies, go home, talk, get their story straight. So the father would have explained that he had been talking to her, leading up to the incident. So it's quite possible that he could know now this information and still not have been the one that was doing the texting at the time. Okay, well, on February 13th, this would have been logged in a little bit earlier. So that would have been 8 o'clock in the morning at your house. Okay, where you and your dad lived. 2 separate devices. See the numbers here, how they're the same. Log in, log out, log in, log out, one device, log in, log out, all within minutes of each other to the same Anthony Schott Snapchat account.
2 separate devices. Log in, log out, log in, log out, log in, log out. The Klein household.
What 2 devices were these? This is a fact. And he says it had to be the Samsung Galaxy then or something. So Kegan lived with his father during this time. And the point to this is that there are 2 devices being used almost simultaneously. Logging in, logging out, logging in, logging out, communicating with people. 2 devices. So there's the iPhone 5 and the Samsung Galaxy, which indicates that both Kegan and his father are actively doing this at the same time. They're probably sitting right next to each other on the devices. It had to be the Samsung Galaxy. About the girls being missing. Right. She said, "Did you hear about Liberty?" You respond on Anthony Schatz, "Oh my God, what happened?" That's talking to someone about the 2 girls that were missing and then wound up dead. He says, "Right, I guess you're right, yeah." So, okay, we finally get close to a direct accusation here. The investigator says, "So how do you, no, hang on, because you don't know a lot of things about all this stuff, but all of a sudden you know for 100% fact." Okay, so now in Vegas, this is after the murder, and he's communicating with a friend of Liberty German, probably a girl from the sleepover, and the investigator says, same conversation of the, "Oh my God, what happened? Do. Anthony Schatz says, "Yeah, we were supposed to meet, but she never showed up."
Boom, which we now have confirmation of from the depositions, right? And several interviews after this conviction of Richard Allen. The Anthony Schatz account, whether that be Kegan or Tony or whoever, was supposed to meet those girls out there, or Libby in particular, according to Reese, right? And according to Holman and some of the others, yes, the Anthony Schatz account or Kegan Kline or whoever was responsible for the girls going out there, was responsible for arranging the meeting out there. And Anthony Schatz says, "Yeah, we were supposed to meet, but she never showed up," which means someone from Anthony Schatz was there. Has that gone missed on all of us? Listen to this. Same conversation of the, "Oh my God, Libby is dead." Anthony Schatz says, "Yeah, we were supposed to meet, but she never showed up," which means you were out there. Whoever was running this Anthony Schatz account that was responsible for luring the girls out there, which Carroll County and state police tells us is Kegan and Tony Kline, they were out there, at least one of them, because we were supposed to meet, but she never showed up. Why are you saying she never showed up if you're not out there to confirm that she did not show up? That's an admission that the Anthony Schatz account, someone behind it, who law enforcement tells us is Kegan and Tony, were out there. And we've missed this. I'm going to back it up a bit.
Probably a girl from the sleepover. And the investigator says, same conversation of the, oh my God, what happened? Do. Anthony Schatz says, yeah, we were supposed to meet, but she never showed up. So the Anthony Schatz account says that he, Anthony Schatz, went to the bridge to meet with Liberty German, but Liberty German never showed up. And then Kegan blows up and he says, that's a fucking lie. That's a damn lie. He just loses it. But again, with the swearing, we know that when he's swearing, it's because he feels like he's lost control of the conversation and he's trying to shut it down. Then he says, how do you know? How can you? Because I know for a fact I did not ever talk to. And then, so how do you? No, hang on. Because you don't know a lot of things about all this stuff, but all of a sudden you know for 100% fact. And then Kegan says, because I didn't fucking murder someone. Yeah. So yeah, I know. Okay. This is his opportunity at this point. This is the closest you're going to get to a direct accusation, which means this is the closest you're going to come to a direct denial. And he starts it with an explanatory statement, because I didn't. So we got immediate, and there's no reason to put the word because in here. So the fact that he puts in because makes this extremely sensitive. Because I didn't is an explanatory plus a negative, which equals deception. So this is deception. Because I didn't fucking. So we have extreme emotion, which we know is linked directly to deception, which is trying to shut down this extremely uncomfortable situation. Because I didn't fucking murder someone. He literally can't say, even surrounded by indicators, he can't say, I didn't fucking murder Liberty German. He says, someone. That is a very common way of reducing your commitment to what you're saying. I didn't murder someone. Technically, he's right. He didn't murder someone. He murdered Liberty German. So what he said, even though it's full of indicators here, the indicators are because he's thinking Liberty, but then he can't even say it. And then he says, yeah, I know. So who was talking to the girl about you were supposed to meet Liberty? And he says, I don't remember ever. Okay, well, that's just a slew of indicators. Now you don't remember again. And he says, yeah, because it never happened. I never fucking told her I would hang out with her. Anything like that. Okay, so he's trying to go back now, even though they have the phone records that he said that he was going to meet her on the bridge. He texted that to Liberty's friend.
Which, as I mentioned, the depositions and several post-trial interviews confirm that fact.
Now he's trying to say that he didn't do that. So we know we have the phone records, so we know that he did, but I'm going to try and find it in his verbiage here. Let's see. Can we find any indicators? So now you don't remember again. Yeah, because start with an explanatory. Technically it's a negative, but more importantly, the word never itself is very problematic because it never happened. That is exactly what a guilty person says. An innocent person is going to say it didn't happen. A guilty person is going to say it never happened. So that alone closes this case. If you completely disregard the 5 confessions, the 500 indicators, all of the actual conversations that they had, the plan to meet up at that time on that bridge, if you disregard everything, this actually is enough to tell me exactly what happened. And then he says, he uses never again, I never fucking told her I would hang out with her, which means he did. He's telling you he did. I never, anything like that. So we have a sentence fragment here. We have never plus fucking, which it means he's emotionally trying to shut this down because he's giving away too much information. I never told her I would hang out with her. It never happened. A bunch of very, very strong indicators of deception tells you exactly what happened here. All right, so now let's see if we can get more information about whether it was Kegan or whether it was his father, because at this point, there's no question. There's absolutely no question what happened. The only question left in my mind, and should be left in your mind, is who's the mastermind. And I mean, it doesn't matter because they should have both been charged.
Mastermind. Who's the mastermind? Where's this concept, this ideation, right? This meme, where's this notion of a mastermind come from? Unless it is exactly what we know it to be. Mastermind. Who is the mastermind of the Delphi murders?
With first-degree murder. Now, something else I want to mention here that you saw in the clip of the press conference is that Liberty, when she went there, she was prepared. She had her phone ready to record the person that approached her. That shows that she was nervous about that encounter. And she recorded it with video and audio, and then she had the wherewithal to hide it somehow, some way. I don't know the details. They just say that she hid it. She hid it in a way that Kegan and his father weren't able to find it or destroy it. So she knew. That goes right in line with she had been talking to them, and she was nervous about this meetup because she was ready to document it. In fact, the fact that she was documenting it, I think, my theory at the end of the day here is that they didn't go there to murder her. They went there to see if she would come back and have sex with the father.
Boom. They went there to kidnap the girl, to do things and record it, and then take her out of state. Sergio just doesn't know that.
That's what they were coordinating. And they wanted to record it and use the videos to sell, put on their website, whatever. And when
No, to sell in Vegas was the eventual attempt, right?
Liberty started recording them, everything went to hell at that point. It turned from a business transaction in their mind, as weird as it is to say that, to she's going to expose them, she's got video, and it turned into a double homicide. So you were the one that sent these pictures to her. You are the one. And Kegan says, I mean, if, and then he gets cut off, that talked to her before the sleepover. You're the one that talked to her all that weekend, and you're the one that talked to her. One of the last people to talk to her before she was murdered. That's what you're telling me. And Kegan says, I guess, yeah, I mean. So this is very clear.
Now, I'm going to stop him here again. Look at this question, okay? For anyone who has doubts, for anyone who's fucking with us and wants us to look like crazies, look at this question. You were the one that talked to her all that weekend. You were the one that talked to her, one of the last people to talk to her through the Anthony Shots account before she was murdered. You, Kegan Kline. I guess, yeah.
That Kegan wasn't actually the one that was texting Liberty German, at least not setting up the meeting on the bridge. So that was his dad. Because look at the question. You're the one of the last people to talk to her before she was murdered. Kegan has done everything he can to try and insinuate denials that he had no involvement. And then he finally says, I guess, yeah. And then now you have to ask why. When he has been very clearly, very steadfastly deceptive about this in the same way, it's very clear to us, but at least he's consistent, right? He's been consistent about being deceptive all the way up to this point. And then he says, so you're the last one. You're the last person to talk to her before she's murdered. And he says, I guess, yeah. That means that there is one thing that is more important to him than being caught for the double homicide. And that's his father getting caught. Protecting his father is more important to him than protecting himself, because he says, I guess, yeah. He would rather put it on himself than bring his father into this. So the detective goes on to say,
Wow. I don't know. Again, this is why it's important that we all work together, that we all continuously be allowed to have freedom of speech and freedom of thought and exchange of ideas, put our minds together, respect each other's opinions and work. Unbelievable.
Now we're worried about grooming. We have a guy that has troves of child pornography on his devices. We have Liberty being groomed. And unfortunately, she was completely enthralled with Anthony's shots. Completely, like, thought, I'm talking to this rich, hot guy. I'm, as she is completely in love with Anthony's shots. And Kegan says, right, yeah. So he acknowledges here that he was grooming Liberty for a purpose, which was to create porn with her. He admits to that. So that.
Any questions? Any questions? You people in the back, any questions as to what he just said? Any questions? Any questions? You got a Fed here, okay? I'm going to back that up a bit because I think that we get distracted.
Fortunately, she was completely enthralled with Anthony's shots. Completely, like, thought, I'm talking to this rich, hot guy. I'm, as she is completely in love with Anthony's shots. And Kegan says, right, yeah. So he acknowledges here that he was grooming Liberty for a purpose, which was to create porn with her. He admits to that. So that tells you why they were supposed to meet on the bridge, which we just talked about. It was supposed to be that first in-person meeting. Then their intention was to bring her back to their house to do a video or pictures. All right, this video is so long. There's a whole bunch more, but I'm going to cut through some of it. I do want to show you this. Let me ask you, why would you, after you failed the polygraph, about knowing about the Delphi investigation, come home, delete your Snapchat and your Instagram, which you used to communicate with Libby, and then you searched, how long does DNA last? Why would you do that? And he says, I have no clue.
Did you guys forget about that, right? Failed the polygraph, goes home, deletes the Snapchat, deletes the Instagram, wipes a phone, possibly destroys a phone, searches, how long does DNA last?
I don't know, probably because they DNA tested me. So he is desperately trying to buy time to figure.
Because you searched how long does DNA last on the body because they DNA tested you? Have we missed this as well in trying to comprehend the enormous volume of information in this case? Question is, why'd you delete your Snapchat, your Instagram? Why did you search how long does DNA last on a body? Because they DNA tested me?
Figure out what to say here. That's just indicator. If I was going to guess what he was going to say here based on everything that I know about him at this point, I would say that probably because I don't fucking know. That's what I would have guessed, that he would have answered this. That's his method of being deceptive. But he actually just tells you, they DNA tested me. So why did you search how long DNA lasts? And he says, because they DNA tested me. And so the investigator says, right? Completely taken off guard that he went with it, and he admitted to that. And then Kegan says, so they obviously have DNA on that body, because why else would they DNA test me? And the investigator's like, yeah, I was going to ask that question and expect you to lie about it, but since you brought it up, let's go ahead and cover this. He says, so why would you worry about your DNA being on the body? And he says, I wouldn't. Then why did you search it? And he says, common question. That's just a common thing to freak out about. Like, why? You know what I mean? I do know what you mean, actually. Why would you care how long DNA lasts? Like, he has to go back, because Kegan started asking himself the incriminating questions. And then he shut down and was like, what am I saying? All right, so why would you care how long DNA lasts? What if it lasts 100 years? What would it matter if it was on the body? Then it wouldn't matter, right? But you knew 110% your DNA wouldn't be there, right? And he says, right. Yeah, well, that's why you don't ask questions like that, because he's just going to take the easy way out. So why does it matter how long it lasts? Fine. So that's how he should have asked it the first time. And he says, because I wondered if the person had DNA on their body, if they actually knew who the person was. Yes, because you were wondering if it was you. And then the investigator says, that doesn't make sense. And says, how doesn't it? Because it doesn't. It doesn't. Kegan says, because in my mind, I'm thinking, these people think I killed someone. Oh, sixth confession. I ran out of fingers. Sixth confession. I killed someone. So if they actually have DNA on the body, they're going to know that I didn't do it. Because if there's no DNA on the body, then it's obvious that, like, okay, well, that's weird. He literally, like a little kid, talked himself into a circle.
Yeah, I mean that's stumbling. He's stumbling there. He's stumbling. He's caught. He's caught in a corner right there. So he's blah 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 blah. Diarrhea of the mouth.
And then just stop talking. So he says, because in my mind, I'm thinking these people think I killed someone. Okay, I'm at least following his deceptive train of thought here, aside from the fact that that's a confession. So if they actually have DNA on the body, and he's trying to work this in, why would I Google how long does DNA last? And he's insinuating that it's not his DNA and that he knows that it's not his DNA. So in his mind, he's trying to piece together, why did I Google this? He's trying to explain, why was I searching how long does DNA last? And also know with certainty that it wasn't me.
See, what had happened was,
how can I connect those two things in a way that makes sense? So he's thinking about this while he's talking. He says, because in my mind, I'm thinking, he is thinking, literally, he's trying to think how to put these things together. These people think I killed someone. So he's restating this to buy time, but he actually confesses, I killed someone. So if they actually have DNA, now he's talking, but he hasn't had time to figure out what he's going to say. He's already used up all of the extra words that he can, and he starts to say, so if they actually have DNA on the body, they're going to know, and there's only one thing that he can say, they're going to know that I did it. So he says the opposite, even though it sounds stupid as hell. He says, if there's actually have DNA on the body, they're going to know that I didn't do it. But then now he's trying to think, but well, why would I care how long the DNA lasts? I still haven't answered that. So he keeps talking, and he says, but if there's no DNA on the body, then it's obvious that, like, okay, well, that's weird. He loses his own track. He's trying to figure out how to connect these things, and he realizes there is no way to connect these things. And then he just stops talking. He's like, yeah, that is weird. So, but again, failed the polygraph. That just adds to it. Everything he just said, it's stacking the whole thing. He starts to lay out the entire case. Kegan and his father have sex with underage girls down to, I think, 3 years old, maybe 2 years old was the youngest that they have on video, that they were grooming Liberty German. He was talking to her for all 4 days leading up to the murder. They had planned to meet on the bridge. He says that he went to the bridge, and he tells the friend, I went there at that time, but she didn't show up. And then after that, he flees and goes to Vegas and spends the entire weekend Googling the Delphi murders. So the detective is laying out this whole case, and you get his typical standard indicators. There's one more thing I want to throw in here. For a fact, audio video recorded on your interview, you told them a few days after this happened, you were with your dad all day. And you went to your grandparents from on your interview, you either said 12 to 2 or 12 to 3, and then you came back home. Okay, his response doesn't even matter here because he time-stamped this. He said that on that day, I was with my dad and we went to my grandparents' house from 12 to either 2 or 3. He couldn't tell.
Wait up. Did he say that? Because if he's with his dad at his grandparents from 12 to 2 or 12 to 3, then how is his phone at home downloading child porn? Remember that whole thing, the reason they cleared him, quote unquote, or the reason they gave him an alibi is to say, well, he's at home downloading child porn. But he says he's at his grandparents' house with his dad from 12 to 3. Wouldn't you bring that your phone, if you're not going to bring your phone to Delphi, why wouldn't you bring your phone to your grandparents? Because maybe if you claimed you were at your grandparents from 12 to 3, maybe they should have used that phone to see if you were telling the truth about being at your grandparents at that time. Oh, but they cleared you because your phone was at home running an app to make it look like someone was using it, like you've confessed to multiple people in the prisons.
On the video, whether he said 2 or 3. Doesn't matter. He time-stamped himself an alibi, which means he time-stamped the murder, which is very common. And I've talked about that in other videos, and you get to see it here too. So just the 60th indicator that he committed the murder.
Time-stamped an alibi that's different from the alibi that ISP, Nicholas McClellan, and Carroll County Sheriff's Office give him, because they say he's at home downloading child porn because his phone is doing that. But he says he's at his grandparents with his father.
Because he time-stamped it, and that's it. So when I gave the explanation of all of the timeline that the detective says this stacks, he explains that whole thing to him. He lays out the entire timeline to him. We have this. We have the evidence. And in the end, Kegan sticks to the indicators that he's been using. I don't know. I would never. I don't know. The last thing he says in there is, I don't know. I don't know. And so the interview interrogation ends. Now, my question is, what happened? What happened after that? Because it's not even like I put all this together. I mean, it would be one thing. I've showed you how I got the information and how I know that his lies, his deception is deception. That just gives you a clearer picture of both how to learn, utilize deception detection techniques, how to use them in practice, what they look like, and how you can make decisions and take action when you determine that somebody's being deceptive. Then you have the ability to identify that, and then you have the self-confidence to say, that's deception, and I am going to act. I'm going to take action based on what I know is deception. Because if you're in a situation where, and this is just the fallback, this is the scenario that is probably the easiest for most people to identify with, is a cheating significant other. If you're in a relationship, let's say it's a long-term relationship, let's say you've been together for 5-6 years, and you're seeing these indicators, I would never cheat on you. I would never do anything like that. You have out of sequence information. They've been talking about this person. They're giving you indicators of deception when they talk about them. You confront them about cheating, and then they give indicators of deception. I would never cheat on you. Instead of saying, I didn't have an affair. I'm not having an affair. I'm not cheating on you. They say, I would never do that. That is a direct indicator. I want you to see this example, this here, and know with certainty and confidence to make a decision and take an action. Say, I know you're lying. This is over. I'm done. I don't need you to admit it because you got the admission. Deception in their answer is also an admission. So to have to hear the words only comes from a lack of self-confidence that you believe the deception that you know. So that's why I am trying to teach this and trying to be so detailed about teaching it. So to sum everything up here, we've seen the entire timeline. We now know that Kegan Kline is a pedophile, a child porn producer and distributor. He's been convicted of that. We also know that the detectives who are looking into this and the FBI, so this investigation was in coordination with the FBI. Now, I'm going to speculate because at this point, I don't know why he wouldn't have been charged with the murder. They have enough. The detective literally says this stuff stacks, and then he lays out the timeline. So it's not like I figured out new information here. They know this, and they have it, and they didn't use it. So the fact that they didn't use it against him, my only speculation that I have here is that the FBI maybe didn't allow them to make the murder charge because maybe they wanted him to testify against his father. Maybe his father was guilty of a lot more and they want Kegan to serve as an informant against his father. I don't know. But for some reason, they didn't bring charges against him. Now, why is that significant? Well, it means that this case stayed open. that the detectives are not allowed, I'm guessing that they're not allowed to bring charges against Kegan Kline. Either that or they are allowed and they chose not to.
Because they're covering it up. Because it's a cover up, Sergio. It's a cover up of the brutal slaughter, the murders of 2 little girls. That's why.
But either way, they wanted to close this case. And that detective, I don't know why I can never remember his name, but the detective that did the Richard Allen interrogation, let's not forget about Richard Allen here. That detective knows all of this information. He knows who the murderer is. All of the investigators know that Kegan Kline is the murderer. For some reason, Kegan wasn't charged. But there's a crime here that is equally significant to murdering those little girls, which is the police department making a conscious decision that they needed to close that case. I have indicators that that detective wanted to close the case so that he could get a promotion. So they railroaded an innocent man. They set up and planted evidence. They clearly planted that bullet. Then they utilized junk science. There's no way that the extraction marks on a bullet casing are going to be unique. There's just no way. I mean, every time you clean the gun, it changes the gun a little bit. When you scrape it with a steel wool on the inside to get the caked on gunpowder off, you're going to slightly change the extractor. They used junk science and they planted a round and they railroaded an innocent man so that they could close a case, so that that detective could get a promotion. I'm not going to buy the argument that they railroaded an innocent man to give the family closure, because they could have arrested the murderer and given the family closure, but they chose not to. So I don't know. Please leave comments. Please tell me what you think. How did this case end up like this? Because to me, when I say I'm 100% certain, oftentimes other people disagree with me. I am very curious if you could possibly disagree with me at the end of this. Is there anyone left on earth who watches this entire video who says, nope, I am 100% sure that Richard Allen killed them? Because I literally don't see how it could be possible. So I hope that, number one, if you are following this case, that this gives you closure on this. You no longer need to worry, is Richard Allen innocent? Is all of the effort and energy that I put into talking about this case, is this going to come back and bite me in the ass? Am I going to put myself out there and say he's innocent and then DNA evidence is going to come back and link him to the case? No, it's not. All the energy that you put in to trying to help him is going to be warranted. Could he possibly be guilty? He's not. There is no possibility. There's no way. You know the truth now. You know the reality. Make a decision on what you want to do. Do you want to continue talking about this? Do you want to try and help get Richard Allen out of prison? Because I'm going to start looking into that. The closest case that I have to this is the Ashley Benefield case. She was convicted of a crime that she was not guilty of, and she is in prison now. And that's wrong, and I don't know what to do about it, but this channel, I'm going to use this platform to advocate for people who are wrongly imprisoned. And I never expected that this is where this channel would go, but this just feels like my calling now. So I'll analyze, I'll put videos out. If the person's guilty, I'm putting out that they're guilty, and then I'm moving on. I don't care if somebody's innocent or guilty, but if they're innocent and then they get convicted, I'm going to try and figure out how to make connections to get these cases looked at. I'm new to this, but all of my experience was through the military and the Department of Defense. So I'm transitioning from a military utilization of these skills into using these skills within our justice system. So I'm going to try and make some connections and see what I can do. But with that being said, I'll say I hope this helps you to decide how you want to move forward with this. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned about deception detection. If you want to try to do something, then let's figure it out. I don't know what to do yet, but I'm going to also try and figure that out. So, and I'll keep people posted on my channel. And please send this video to people. I know that's a self-serving thing to say, but what I want to do is to develop a reputation in this field in deception detection to the point where people who can change the outcomes, the district attorneys, the defense lawyers, the agencies that give money to defend people who are wrongly imprisoned, I want those people to listen to this channel. I want them to hear my voice and understand what I'm doing. And the only way that that happens is if you share this with people, you talk, you interact. And so if you believe in what I'm doing, send this around. Let's keep talking about Richard Allen, and let's try to get this video to somebody who has the power to do something about it. All right, I will let you go and I'll start working on my next video. So that being said, continue to learn this stuff, and we'll see if we can help out Richard Allen here. All right, thanks. I'll see you in the next video.
Does this now mean that all the other men are cleared? Can you use that word?
Who is all the other men?
The other men that were looked at during the course of the investigation that you always said we couldn't say that they're cleared, can you now say they're cleared?
I may not use that word cleared, but what I can tell you is we don't have any other evidence that ties them to the offense at this time.
Absolutely amazing and touching. Very touching ending there, Sergio. I don't know if Deb's still here, if she would put up Sergio's link again. Maybe I have it, actually. Let's see. Everyone who is watching this show, please now go to Truth Revealed by SD. Truth Revealed on YouTube. You can find Sergio's channel. He's got tons of work up there. It's absolutely amazing resource. And what he was trying to do is teach some skills from the military and intelligence communities of deception detection to the public. And instead, where he finds himself is astonished that law enforcement would know that Richard Allen is not the killer of the Delphi victims, and they would know that there are other parties who absolutely are involved and that there is evidence to prove such, and yet still choose to railroad an innocent man. Absolutely appalling. How is this allowed to stand? As I said before, or as I've titled my previous discussion, the Delphi murders case against Richard Allen cannot stand. We know from these basic skills and concepts that there has been a lot of deception in the Delphi murders over the years, exhibited from everybody involved. We have detected deception from the witnesses, from the family, from all of the third-party suspect POIs, and from law enforcement and the prosecutor. How on earth can the world sit here and watch all of the obvious deception taking place from the leadership and the direct parties involved in this entire scam and not do something about it? It's extremely clear that all involved parties have exhibited 9 years of deception around the simple murders of 2 girls. How's that allowed? How's it acceptable in our society? Anyhow, please do go support Sergio on his channel by subscribing, watching some of his other content. By the way, as I mentioned, he's got a lot of Delphi content, and we will be taking a look at some more. Okay, I promise you that. We will be doing another one of these, taking a look at some more of his content on Delphi. And with that being said, I hope you guys had a nice time. As he said at the outset of the show, you might have needed your weighted blanket and your I don't know, your comfort foods and you might have had to suck your thumb and cry halfway through it. But I hope nevertheless that you enjoyed that deep dive. We are putting, in this instance, Kegan, Kline, and Sergio under the microscope and taking a closer look at that. And keep in mind, this content that you saw tonight that we watched together was from over a year ago. Okay, that's over a year ago. There's plenty of great content out there. There is absolutely plenty of great content out there on many channels. So keep looking, keep diving deep, keep taking your notes. We're getting closer and closer and closer day by day into ferreting out the truth in the tragic Abby and Libby case. And I'd like to thank all of you for sharing this Friday night with me, and everyone in the replay who catches this at a later time. I appreciate your participation. Let us know in the chat your ideas and your thoughts on this. I'm extremely, I'm kind of heartbroken. I'm kind of heartbroken. Honestly, I didn't think I'd feel this way at the end of it, but I think that I just got another round of heartbreak, especially with the touching close that he gave. But again, you guys in the chat especially, you really make this worthwhile and you make it possible to continue. So thank you for being here. I saw every single chat that came through, and because I was not reading and presenting to you, I was able to watch the chat very closely, and I do appreciate all of your participation. It was a great chat and a lot of great input. So thank you again. And I'm tired. My voice is shot, so I'm going to get out of here. But God bless. God bless Libby and Abby. And God bless all of you. We will keep fighting. We will keep looking. And you ain't going to bury this case with a wrongful conviction. Sorry, it ain't going to happen. All right. And yeah, I want to leave it with Trial Junkie's sentiment right here. We've waited a long time and worked really hard, but we are winning. It's exhausting. I'm absolutely exhausted and heartbroken, but it's a lot of work has gone into this, years and years and years, and a lot of grief. Anyway, Shelly, It's a New Day, Christina, Audio, Deb, Big JD, Christina. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my mouse here. Come on. There we go. Suede, Becky, Carol, Goose's Gammy, Brittany Renee, Matt Payton, Suede Smith, Pertinent. I don't want to miss anyone. There were a bunch here earlier. So shout out to all of you who were here earlier. Paula, Who's Her Daddy, Dennis McKean. And hey, I'll leave it at this. Anyone else I've missed? Quietly, Erica Morris, Silence Woman, MJ Lewis, 1964, Four Pitbulls Across America, Noe Amos, Peggy O, Elizabeth Park. Hey, all of you. Okay, God bless. I'm out of here. I'll see you guys later. Hug your kids, hug your wife. Or if you're in Delphi, hide your kids, hide your wife. I'll see you guys later. God bless. We'll be back. Cheers.
What?